Tonight, instead of opening a history book, you are opening a forgotten door that has remained quietly closed for centuries. Beyond it you find no battlefield and no grand hall filled with famous names. You find a small American house resting beneath a dark sky, its windows black except for the faintest glow beside a kitchen hearth. Somewhere nearby a wooden bucket waits beside a well. Boots stand near the door. A wool blanket hangs over the back of a chair and yesterday's ashes still hold a little warmth. These are the corners of history that are easiest to overlook. You are entering the world of ordinary people whose days were shaped by firewood weather, muddy roads, handmade meals, crowded beds, and countless small routines rarely preserved in history books. Before tonight's forgotten story quietly unfolds, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you enjoy relaxing journeys through history. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Imagine wandering through an old library after everyone else has gone home, opening forgotten drawers and quietly reading the lives hidden inside. Now settle in, get comfortable, and let history quietly unfold around you. Section 1. I'll begin before sunrise. Outside the household America is almost completely dark. There are no street lights glowing beyond the windows, no electric clocks waiting beside the bed, and no distant hum of machines. Depending on where you have arrived, you might hear wind moving through bare branches, insects singing in summer grass or rain tapping softly against wooden shingles. Perhaps you're standing somewhere in New England during the 18th century. Perhaps the house is farther south or beside a farm road in Pennsylvania or Virginia. The details change from region to region, but one thing remains familiar. Morning begins early. You lie beneath heavy blankets in a room that has grown steadily colder during the night. If winter has settled over the countryside, the air around your face may feel surprisingly sharp. Frost can appear along the inside of a window. Water left in a basin may become painfully cold, and in harsher weather it can partly freeze. Bedrooms are not necessarily warm spaces. Heating an entire house is difficult and expensive in labour. Firewood must be cut, split, carried, dried, stacked, and constantly replaced. Most households therefore concentrate warmth around fireplaces or later around stoves, rather than trying to maintain comfortable temperatures everywhere. You understand why the bed itself matters so much. Blankets are not simply decoration. They form a small island of warmth. Depending on the household and period, you might sleep beneath wool blankets, quilts, coverlets, or layers made from whatever materials the family can obtain. Your mattress could contain feathers if the household is prosperous, but straw, corn husks, wool, or other fillings are common possibilities. Several people may sleep in the same room. Children often share beds with siblings, and household arrangements can shift according to age, wealth, available space, and season. In smaller homes, privacy is a luxury rather than an expectation. You remain still for another moment. There is no alarm clock ringing. Instead, the household wakes according to habits shaped by daylight animals' work, and sometimes simple mechanical clocks owned by families who can afford them. Roosters have become famous as rural alarm clocks, though. Real mornings are rarely so perfectly arranged. A rooster may call long before you wish to rise. Dogs stir. Horses move inside a barn. Cattle begin making their presence known. Someone in the house wakes first. Very often that person faces the important task of restoring the fire. You follow quietly toward the hearth. Last night before sleeping, the family tried to preserve glowing coals beneath a covering of ash. This simple practice can save considerable effort the next morning. If a living ember survives, you can gently uncover it, add dry material, and persuade the fire back into life. You kneel beside the hearth. Ash shifts beneath an iron poker. A faint orange point appears. Soon you smell smoke, dry wood, and the slightly earthy scent of yesterday's ashes. Small twigs crackle. Larger pieces follow. The room slowly becomes visible. For many early American families, keeping fire was part of the rhythm of survival. Fire-cooked food heated rooms, warmed water, dried clothing, provided light and supported many household tasks. Losing it was inconvenient. Before matches became inexpensive and widely available during the 19th century, relighting a fire could require flint and steel tinder or assistance from a neighbouring household. One unusual custom grew from this dependence. In some communities, if a household's fire went completely out, someone might carry live coals home from a neighbour. You can imagine the careful walk back through the morning darkness, protecting a small container whose glowing contents represented breakfast warmth and the beginning of the day. Exactly how frequently people relied on neighbours for fire is difficult to measure. Everyday actions like these were often too ordinary to be recorded, and surviving descriptions vary greatly across time and place. That uncertainty follows you through much of ordinary history. People documented wars, elections, property transfers, and public events far more carefully than they documented the moment someone borrowed an ember before breakfast. Yet such moments filled most human lives. As the hearth strengthens, other people begin to stir. You hear wooden floorboards creak above you. Clothing must now be put on, and this too takes more time than you might expect. There is no central heating encouraging you to linger half-dressed. You pull on garments quickly. For many people, clothing is valuable enough to be repaired repeatedly rather than casually replaced. Fabric requires labor. Garments may be homemade, locally produced, altered from older clothing, or purchased according to the family's means. You notice patches. They are ordinary. A repaired sleeve or carefully mended stocking does not automatically suggest extreme poverty. In a society where textiles represent considerable work and expense, repairing usable clothing is simply practical. Your clothes also carry smells that would be familiar to everyone around you. Wood smoke settles into wool and linen. Leather boots smell of grease, earth, and dampness. Kitchens leave traces of food and fire. Laundry practices differ widely, and garments worn close to the body may be washed more often than heavy outer layers. You step toward the window. The sky is becoming pale. Outside, the first real work has already begun. If you live on a farm, animals cannot wait for a comfortable breakfast. Cows may require milking. Horses need feeding. Chickens must be checked. Water must be carried. You open the door. Cold air enters at once. The yard looks different from a modern yard. Its ground may be packed earth rather than grass. Nearby stand sheds, fences, barrels, woodpiles, perhaps a smokehouse or barn. The placement varies according to region, occupation, climate, and wealth. You hear the rhythmic sound of an axe somewhere nearby. Firewood is always disappearing. A household can consume astonishing quantities of it, especially in cold climates. Historians know from surviving accounts that fuel gathering occupied an important place in domestic and agricultural labour, although estimating exactly how much time a typical family spent on it remains difficult. Every household was different. Some lived close to abundant woodland. Others watched nearby supplies shrink as towns expanded and forests were cleared. You walk toward the well. The bucket descends with a hollow wooden sound. There is no tap to turn. Water possesses weight. This is one of the easiest details of old life to forget. Every gallon used for drinking, cooking, washing, cleaning, or animals must come from somewhere. If it comes from a well or spring, someone usually carries it. You feel the handle press against your fingers as the bucket rises. The water looks clear, and it's clear and cleared. Whether it is truly safe is another question. People understand that foul or stagnant water can be undesirable, but the microbial causes of many illnesses remain unknown for much of the period you're exploring. Wells placed too close to privies, animal areas, or other contamination can create dangers that are invisible to the eye. Still, mourning continues without anyone thinking of themselves as historical. That may be the quietest truth of all. You return toward the house carrying water while smoke rises from the chimney. Inside, breakfast is beginning. A pot may hang over the fire. Cornmeal bread, leftovers, porridge, meat, or other foods appear depending on region, season, and prosperity. The household grows louder. Spoons touch bowls. A chair scrapes against the floor. Someone opens the door again. Someone else asks about the weather. There are chores waiting everywhere, and yet the scene does not feel entirely unfamiliar. You still wake reluctantly on cold mornings. You still search for warmth. Think about breakfast, listen to weather, and prepare yourself for whatever the day requires. The tools have changed. The morning has not. As daylight finally reaches across the floorboards, you begin to notice the house itself more carefully. Its walls, rooms, furniture, smells, and hidden corners have their own stories. And with the fire now burning steadily behind you, you are ready to wander deeper inside. Section 2. With daylight spreading across the floorboards, you begin to see the house more clearly. At first, it seems small. A modern visitor might expect every activity to have its own room, but many early American homes do not work that way. One space may serve as kitchen, dining room, sitting room, workshop, and sometimes sleeping area. Rooms change purpose through the day because useful space is too valuable to waste. You stand near the hearth and notice how much life gathers around it. The fireplace is not decorative. It dominates the room. Iron hooks, pots, kettles, tongs, and cooking tools hang nearby. Soot darkens the brick or stone above the opening. The floor closest to the fire bears marks from years of ash sparks, boots, and dropped utensils. Smoke reaches almost everything. Even with a good chimney, some escapes into the room. It settles into rafters, cloth, hair, furniture, and stored food. The scent mixes with beeswax, leather, damp wool, wood shavings, cooked grain, and whatever meal was prepared most recently. You move closer to the walls. They may be made from timber, brick, stone, or a mixture of local materials. Construction depends heavily on region, climate, wealth, and local tradition. There is no single old American house. That is worth remembering. English, Dutch, German, French, Spanish, indigenous, and African traditions all influenced the way people built and used domestic spaces, yet inside many homes, space remains precious. You step toward a table. It may be heavy and scarred from use. Knife marks cross the surface. Candle wax clings near one corner. Bread has been kneaded here. Clothes have been repaired here. Children have learned letters here. Counts have been written here when paper and ink were available. Furniture is valuable. A household might own chairs, stools, benches, chests, bedsteads, shelves, and perhaps a cupboard. Pieces remain in use for years, sometimes generations. A sturdy chest is especially useful because it can hold clothing, linens, papers, or tools while also serving as a seat. You open one carefully. The hinges complain softly. Inside folded cloth carries the faint smell of wood herbs or simply age. Families sometimes use aromatic plants or cedar to discourage insects, though no method offers perfect protection. Textiles deserve careful storage. Sheets, blankets, shirts, aprons, petticoats, and other cloth goods represent hours of spinning, weaving, sewing, buying, mending, and washing. Even when commercial fabric becomes easier to obtain, households continue treating cloth with care. You notice that decoration is limited. A wealthier home might display mirrors, prints, ceramics, clocks, or polished furniture. In a modest dwelling, beauty appears more quietly. A quilt brightens a bed. A brass candlestick catches the light. A row of plates may be displayed proudly. Small objects carry meaning because there are fewer of them. You continue through a doorway. If the house has several rooms, they may still offer little privacy. Doors are thin, walls carry voices. Children, relatives, servants, apprentices, lodgers, or visitors may move through the same domestic spaces. The modern expectation of a private bedroom develops gradually. For many families, sleeping is shared. You might find a bed in a main room, another in a small chamber, and children sleeping in an attic or loft. In crowded houses, temporary bedding can be arranged wherever space allows. At night, you hear breathing nearby. Someone turns under a blanket. A child whispers. Floorboards creak when another person rises. Complete solitude is uncommon. Historians can trace changing ideas about privacy through architecture diaries, inventories, and surviving homes, but the emotional experience is harder to recover. Some people may have longed for quiet. Others may have considered constant family presence entirely normal. The records rarely tell you. You climb a narrow staircase. The steps are steeper than you expect. Above you, the air changes. In summer, the upper floor may trap heat beneath the roof. In winter, it can become painfully cold. Small windows admit limited light, and glass itself can be costly in earlier periods. Some windows use many small panes because large sheets of glass are difficult to manufacture and transport. You pass beside one. Outside, the yard appears through slightly uneven glass, bending the view just enough to make the world shimmer. Below, someone moves a kettle. The sound travels easily. You continue toward a loft. Here you may find trunks, tools, dried herbs, spinning equipment, broken furniture awaiting repair, or food stored away from animals. Homes often contain things too useful to discard, even when they are not immediately needed. Repair is a constant habit. A cracked bowl might be mended. A chair receives a new rung. A worn garment becomes material for another purpose. Metal scraps wait for reuse. The household survives partly by wasting as little as possible. You descend and move toward the cellar. The temperature drops. The air smells of soil, apples, onions, damp wood, and stone. A cellar can be one of the most useful spaces in the house. Root vegetables, barrels, cider-preserved foods, tools, and other supplies may remain here, where temperatures are steadier than upstairs. But not every home has one. Families also use lofts, sheds, springhouses, smokehouses, cupboards, pits, and other outbuildings. These spaces reveal how closely household life follows the seasons. Autumn food may need to last through winter. Summer heat threatens meat and dairy. Mice search for grain. Insects find flour. Moisture spoils what labor has produced. A household is always negotiating with the environment. You return upstairs. Now sunlight reaches farther into the room. Dust floats in a bright beam near the window. You see scratches on the table, patches in plaster, and uneven boards beneath your feet. Wood expands. Hinges squeak. The fire shifts. A pot lid rattles as steam escapes. These ordinary sounds create the rhythm of home. One unusual detail may be hidden where you cannot see it. Archaeologists and renovators have sometimes found old shoes bottles, scraps of fabric, written, charms, and other objects concealed inside walls, chimneys, and roof spaces of early buildings. Why they were placed there is not always certain. Some may have been connected to folk beliefs about protection or good fortune. Others could have been stored lost or hidden for practical reasons. The mystery remains inside the architecture. You imagine a worn shoe being placed behind a wall 2 centuries ago. Someone once touched it. Someone chose to leave it there. That small act survived longer than the person who made it. Standing in the center of the room, the house now feels far less empty. It is crowded with habit. Every hook has a purpose, every chest protects something. Every corner has been negotiated between work, sleep, storage, warmth, and family life. The house is not simply shelter. It is a machine for daily survival built from timber, brick, cloth, iron, smoke, memory, and endless adjustment. And when you look again toward the hearth, you notice how completely the household depends on the fire still burning there. That small orange glow leads you onward. Keeping it alive will become one of the most demanding routines of old American life. Section 3. The fire draws your attention before anything else does. It has been burning since before sunrise, and already it has changed the room. The air is warmer. The kettle is beginning to murmur. Light moves across the iron tools beside the hearth, and a faint smell of smoke has settled into your clothes. You understand quickly that fire is not merely part of the household. It organizes the household. Before modern heating gas stoves, electric lights, or easy matches, flame sits quietly at the center of daily life. It cooks breakfast boils, water dries, damps stockings, warms cold hands, softens wax, heats irons, lights rooms, and helps preserve food. But fire never works without labor. Someone must feed it. You step outside toward the woodpile. The morning air feels cooler after the warmth of the kitchen. Damp earth presses beneath your shoes. You hear an axe striking wood somewhere beyond the yard, each blow followed by a short silence. Firewood begins long before the flame. Trees must be selected, cut, trimmed, split, moved, stacked, and allowed to dry. In heavily wooded areas, timber may seem abundant, but usable firewood still demands time and strength. A family preparing for winter cannot wait until snow begins. Wood is gathered months ahead. You run your hand across a split log. Its surface is rough and pale where the axe opened it. The outer bark feels darker and cooler. Fresh wood carries a sharp, resinous smell, but it does not burn as efficiently as properly seasoned wood. Drying matters. The household therefore keeps piles beneath sheds, against walls, beside fences, or wherever rain can be kept away. In colder regions, the amount required can be enormous. A large fireplace consumes fuel quickly. Poorly designed chimneys allow heat to escape. Drafty walls and windows make the problem worse. You begin to see winter differently. It is not simply a season of snow. It is a season measured in stacked wood. Every armful brought indoors represents work already completed outside. You lift several pieces. They are heavier than they look. By the time you carry them into the house, small flakes of bark cling to your sleeve. The warmth near the hearth feels pleasant again, but it comes with a new understanding. Comfort has weight. You place a log beside the fire. Its arrival is only one small part of the routine. The fire itself must be managed carefully. Too little air and it smoulders. Too much fuel at once can waste heat or create heavy smoke. Cooking demands different temperatures, and there is no simple dial to turn. You watch someone move glowing coals beneath a pot. This is a skill. Experienced cooks know how to judge heat by sight, sound, distance, and habit. A pan may be placed over coals rather than high flames. A Dutch oven can be surrounded with hot embers. Bread, stews, roasted meat, cakes, and vegetables all require slightly different arrangements. Recipes sometimes assume knowledge that modern cooks would expect to see written down. Instructions may say little more than to bake something in a quick oven or a moderate oven. You are expected to know what that means. No thermometer confirms it. You learn by experience. A hand held briefly near the heat, the color of coals, the speed at which butter melts, and the behavior of dough all become forms of measurement. This ordinary knowledge rarely appears in grand historical records, yet entire households depend on it. You look toward the fireplace opening. It's wide enough to seem almost like a small room. In many 18th century homes, especially older ones, fireplaces can be large because cooking happens directly within them. Iron cranes, hooks, trivets, kettles, and long-handled utensils help people work without leaning too close to the heat. Still, sparks escape. Clothing can catch. Wooden floors can scorch. Children must learn early to respect the hearth. House fires are a genuine danger, although the exact frequency is difficult to reconstruct because small domestic incidents were not always carefully recorded. People know the risk. They also have little choice. You glance toward a candle on the table. Fire follows you into darkness as well. When evening arrives, candles, rushlights, lamps, and hearth glow become the household's artificial light. Good candles are valuable. Beeswax burns relatively cleanly and pleasantly, but it can be expensive. Tallow candles, often made from rendered animal fat, are more common in many households. They smell stronger. They may smoke, and in warm weather they soften easily. You imagine an autumn afternoon devoted to candle making. Rendered fat is heated. Wicks are dipped repeatedly, each layer cooling before another is added. Slowly, thin cords become usable candles. It is patient work. Some households also make use of rushlights. You picture a rush plant being peeled to expose its soft center, then drawn through melted fat. The finished light is simple and inexpensive. Its flame is modest. It does not flood a room with the brightness that matters, because old nights remain dark even indoors. A single candle illuminates faces, hands, and a small circle of furniture. Corners disappear into the shadow. Reading becomes more difficult. Sewing requires care. People move slowly through unfamiliar rooms. Light itself becomes something to conserve. You do not casually burn several candles when one will do. This creates an unusual relationship with darkness. You are not trying to defeat it completely. You live inside it. The hearth throws shifting orange patterns across the walls. Outside the windows, night becomes almost absolute. 4 widespread street lighting towns also darken deeply after sunset. Moonlight matters. Lanterns matter. Familiarity matters. I begin to understand why people often organize their days around daylight. The sun is free. Every other light requires material. There is another overlooked task hidden inside the hearth. Ash must be removed. You watch someone shovel pale grey remains into a container. Ash is not always treated as useless waste. Wood ashes can be used in soap making because they help produce lye. They may also find uses in cleaning, agriculture, or other household tasks depending on local practice. Even what the fire leaves behind can become useful. This habit of reuse appears everywhere. Fat becomes candles. Ash contributes to soap. Small wood scraps become kindling. Charred coals may help restart tomorrow's flame. Very little is discarded without thought. You look again into the hearth. By midday, the fire has changed. Morning flames have settled into a steadier bed of heat. A pot simmers. A child warms hands nearby. Damp cloth hangs where the rising warmth can reach it. The room smells of cooked grain, smoke, and wood. You realize how much attention this one glowing space demands. It must be fed. It must be controlled. It must be protected from rain and wind. It must be kept away from bedding, loose cloth, and careless movement. And when night comes, it must often be reduced carefully rather than simply abandoned. Before sleeping, someone may arrange coals beneath ash, hoping enough heat survives until dawn. This becomes a quiet ritual. The room darkens. A poker moves through the embers. Ash falls gently over orange light. You can almost feel the household preparing a small gift for its future self. Morning warmth is being hidden inside the remains of evening. No one calls this remarkable. It is simply what people do, and that may be why it deserves your attention. The greatest part of daily history is made from tasks performed so often that nobody thinks to record them. As you watch the last bright spark settle beneath grey ash, another familiar smell begins drifting from the kitchen. Something is cooking. The fire has done its work again, and now with the household fully awake, you follow that smell toward the breakfast table. Section 4. The smell reaches you before the meal does. It is warm, earthy, and slightly smoky, drifting through the room from the hearth you have been watching so closely. A wooden spoon moves slowly through a pot. Bread rests near the fire. Somewhere on the table, a knife scrapes across a board. Breakfast in old America does not begin with opening a refrigerator. There is no refrigerator. There is no freezer. Humming quietly in the corner, no carton of milk waiting behind a door, and no shelf of food preserved by cold machinery. Instead, breakfast begins with storage, season, habit, and whatever survived yesterday. You move closer to the table. In one household you may find cornmeal porridge, in another bread. Elsewhere there may be oat porridge, buckwheat cakes, potatoes, and some salted meat, leftover stew, cheese, eggs, or something carried over from the previous evening. There is no single old American breakfast. Region matters. Season matters. Money matters. The foods available in coastal New England differ from those on a southern plantation, a Pennsylvania farm, or a frontier settlement farther west. Yet one pattern appears again and again. People eat what can be stored. You look toward a sack of grain. Dry grain is dependable. Corn, wheat, rye, oats, and buckwheat can survive far longer than fresh meat or milk if they are kept away from moisture and pests. Once ground into meal or flour, they become the foundation of countless meals. Corn is especially important in many parts of early America. You may eat it as mush-pone hoe cake bread or another preparation shaped by local custom. The names change. The basic comfort does not. A bowl of warm cornmeal on a cold morning carries the kind of quiet satisfaction that needs little explanation. You lift the spoon. The texture is thick. If the household has a milk, molasses, butter, or sweetener, someone may add a little. Poorer families might eat it more plainly. Even sweetness has a history. Fine sugar is available in colonial America, but it can be costly and is not used casually by everyone. Molasses maple products, honey and other sweeteners may appear depending on region and means. Begin to understand how deeply geography shapes the table. The household does not ask what it feels like eating today. It asks what remains. Freshness is temporary. That makes preservation essential. You follow someone toward a pantry. It is cooler and darker than the main room. Shelves hold jars, crocks, dried foods, sacks, perhaps smoked meat or preserved fruit. The exact contents change throughout the year. In autumn, stores may feel generous. By late winter, they may look noticeably thinner. Food preservation is not a hobby. It is a calendar. You can almost read the seasons from the shelves. Apples may be dried or stored carefully in a cellar. Vegetables rest in cool spaces. Meat may be salted, smoked, dried, or preserved in fat. Milk becomes butter or cheese because fresh dairy spoils quickly. Cabbage can be fermented. Fruit can become preserves. Beans dry well. Herbs hang from rafters. Nothing about this work is glamorous. It is repetitive, slow, and necessary. You reach toward a crock. Inside might be salted meat packed beneath brine. Salt is one of the great quiet technologies of the household. Before refrigeration, it gives families time. It draws moisture from food and slows spoilage, allowing meat and fish to survive far beyond the day they were prepared. But heavily salted food has consequences. Before cooking, meat may need soaking. Even then, it can remain very salty. You'll begin to imagine winter meals carrying the same preserved flavors again and again. Fresh vegetables disappear. Fresh fruit becomes scarce. The diet narrows. This seasonal monotony is easy to overlook because modern grocery stores have trained you to expect nearly every food throughout the year. Old kitchens do not offer that illusion. February tastes different from August. You return toward the hearth. A strip of meat sizzles in a pan. The smell fills the room. Perhaps it is pork, one of the most common preserved meats in many American households. Pigs are useful because they can forage or grow quickly and provide large amounts of fat and meat. Nothing useful is wasted easily. Fat becomes cooking grease, soap, or candles. Bones may flavor broth. Scraps find another purpose. Food is expensive in labor even when it is not expensive in money. You sit again. The bread beside you feels dense. Bread itself can be complicated. Wheat flour produces the light loaves. Many people prefer, but wheat does not grow equally well everywhere. Families may mix grains or rely more heavily on rye and corn. In parts of New England, combinations of rye and corn become familiar. Farther south, cornmeal becomes even more central. On the frontier, ingredients depend on what people can grow, hunt, trade, or carry. Recipes adapt constantly. That flexibility is one of the hidden strengths of ordinary cooking. You notice another pot near the fire. Yesterday's food may be returning. Leftovers are valuable. A stew can be reheated. Cold meat can be sliced. Bread can be toasted near the fire. Cooked grains can be fried or warmed. The modern idea of breakfast as an entirely separate category of food is weaker here. Morning food is simply food. You eat what makes sense. One usual detail appears in the cup beside you. It may not contain coffee. Depending on the place and period, you might drink cider, small beer, milk, water, tea, coffee, or some local substitute. In many households, especially in earlier periods, weak alcoholic beverages can appear at meals more routinely than a modern visitor expects. This does not mean everyone begins the morning in drunkenness. Low alcohol beverages occupy a different place in the diet and household economy. Cider is especially common in apple-growing regions. Even children may sometimes consume diluted or weak fermented drinks. Exactly how frequently this happens varies greatly, and historians must be cautious because habits differ across communities, classes, religions, and decades. The breakfast table is never one simple story. You lift a cup. Perhaps steam rises from coffee. Coffee grows increasingly important in American life, especially after the 18th century, but access changes over time. Tea carries its own habits and associations. Some families use roasted grains or roots when imported goods are expensive or unavailable. People improvise. They always have. You begin noticing what is missing. There is no orange juice, no cold cereal, no plastic wrapping, no reliable supply of fresh milk for distant city households. There is also less certainty about whether stored food remains safe. People use smell, appearance, texture, habit, and experience to judge it. Sometimes they judge correctly. Sometimes they do not. Foodborne illness exists, but without modern microbiology, its causes are often misunderstood. A bad meal may be blamed on weather, constitution, spoiled air, or something else entirely. The kitchen carries risks that remain invisible. Still, most mornings are ordinary. You hear the scrape of spoons. Someone asks for bread. A child reaches too quickly and is corrected. A chair shifts closer to the fire. Outside frost begins to soften in the rising light. Breakfast is not leisurely for everyone. Farm work waits. Shops must open. Animals need tending. Laundry sewing, wood cutting, hauling, baking, childcare. and dozens of other tasks are already pressing forward. Meals fit themselves around labor. You look at the final piece of bread on the table. Nothing about it seems remarkable, yet it contains a chain of work stretching backward through planting, harvesting, threshing, milling, carrying, mixing, kneading, heating, and fire. Even a simple breakfast is crowded with invisible hands. You finish slowly. The bowl is nearly empty. The room smells of grain smoke, grease, warm wood, and damp clothing beginning to dry near the hearth. Someone clears the table. Someone else reaches for the water bucket, and that small movement leads you toward another overlooked truth. Every plate must be washed. Every shirt must eventually be cleaned. Every body must somehow be bathed. And in a world without indoor plumbing, none of it begins with turning a tap. Section 5. The water bucket seems ordinary until you try carrying it. Its wooden handle presses into your palm as you cross the yard, and the water inside shifts heavily with every step. A little spills over the rim and darkens the packed earth beneath you. I begin to understand an important truth. Water is work. Before indoor plumbing becomes common, every basin filled for washing and every pot heated for cleaning begins with someone fetching water by hand. You walk back towards the house. Perhaps the source is a well only a few yards away. Perhaps it is a pump beside the kitchen door, a spring farther downhill, or a stream beyond the fence. The distance changes everything. A household fortunate enough to have convenient water can use more of it. A family carrying water from farther away must think carefully before pouring it out. You set the bucket beside the hearth. Now another task begins. Cold water is useful for many things, but bathing comfortably requires heat. You pour some into a pot and move it toward the fire. There is no water heater quietly waiting in another room. You wait instead. The iron grows warm. Steam begins slowly. A full bath can require several buckets, which means repeated trips outside and repeated rounds of heating. Suddenly, the familiar image of people in the past refusing to bathe seems too simple. The real problem is often not dislike of cleanliness. It is labor. You can wash your face quickly in a basin. You can wash hands. You can clean specific parts of the body using a cloth and a smaller amount of warm water. A complete immersion bath is far more demanding. You imagine a wooden or metal tub being carried into a room. Water must be brought in. Then more must be heated. Afterward, all of it must be removed again. You cannot simply pull a plug and walk away. This practical difficulty helps explain why washing habits differ so greatly from modern expectations. People clean themselves, but they often do so without stepping into a full bathtub. A basin sits on a washstand. You dip a cloth into the water. The room is cold enough that undressing completely would be unpleasant. Washing in sections makes sense. Hands and face receive frequent attention because they are exposed. Feet can be washed after muddy work. Hair receives its own routines depending on period, region, class, and personal habit. How often people wash their entire bodies is harder to answer. Surviving diaries, household manuals, advertisements, medical advice, and personal letters reveal many practices, but they do not create one universal schedule. Old America is too large for that. A city boarding house and an isolated farm may handle water very differently. So might a wealthy family and a neighboring one. You turn toward the ale. A small bar of soap rests nearby. Soap itself tells another quiet story. Many households make soap from materials already available around them. Animal fat provides one ingredient. Wood ashes provide another. You remember the pale ashes being removed from the hearth. When water is filtered through certain wood ashes, it creates an alkaline liquid used in traditional soap making. Combined carefully with fat, it can produce a rough household soap. The process requires experience. The strength of homemade lye varies. Recipes are not always precise. Someone skilled at the work learns by habit, texture, appearance, and repeated practice. The finished soap may not resemble the smooth-scented bars you know. It can be soft. It may smell strongly. It can also be extremely useful. Clothing waits nearby. Laundry demands even more water than washing yourself. You follow the household outside on wash day. This may not happen every morning. Washing large quantities of clothing is difficult enough that families often gather the work into larger sessions. A kettle heats water. Garments are assorted. Fabric is soaked, scrubbed, beaten, rubbed, boiled, rinsed, wrung, and eventually hung to dry depending on local technique and available materials. The work is physical. Now bend over a tub. Your hands remain wet. The water cools quickly. Soap makes the skin slippery and rough at the same time. In winter, the experience can be miserable. In summer, heat rises from steaming water while insects move around the yard. Laundry day carries its own sounds. Water splashes against wood. Fabric slaps against a surface. A bucket strikes the ground. Someone calls for more hot water. You smell soap smoke, damp linen, and the nearby earth. There is almost always another load. Heavy garments present special problem. Wool can shrink or change shape if handled badly. Large blankets become extremely heavy when wet. Thick clothing takes time to dry. Weather therefore becomes part of the laundry schedule. A sunny, breezy day is valuable. Rain delays everything. You look up at garments hanging from a line or spread where air can reach them. White cloth catches the sunlight. This introduces another unfamiliar habit. People may rely on sunlight itself to help brighten laundry. Bleaching cloth in the sun has a long history. Households may repeatedly wet and expose fabric to light, allowing time and sunlight to assist the process. Cleanliness is partly chemical. It is also environmental. You move toward a shirt being repaired beside the doorway. Washing wears fabric down. That matters because clothing is valuable. Too much harsh cleaning can shorten the life of a garment, so there is always a balance between cleanliness and preservation. Outer garments may be brushed, aired, spot cleaned or protected rather than constantly washed. Linen worn closer to the skin helps absorb sweat and can be cleaned more readily than some heavier outer layers. This arrangement influences how people experience hygiene. You may wear a fresh shirt beneath a coat that has not been immersed in water for a very long time. To modern eyes, that may seem strange. To the person wearing it, the important washable layer is the one touching the body. I begin to notice how different definitions of cleanliness can be. They are shaped by available technology. You walk back indoors and find a small shaving tool. Men who shave face another morning ritual. Razors require sharpening. Warm water softens the beard. Soap or another preparation helps the blade move. A careless hand leaves small cuts. Barbers perform this service in towns, but many men shave themselves or rely on another household member. Hair care also depends on simple tools. Combs matter. Fine-toothed combs can help remove dirt and parasites. That leads you toward a less pleasant part of old domestic life. Lisa fleas, bedbugs, and other pests are familiar problems. They are not proof that everyone is careless. They thrive in crowded rooms, bedding, clothing, animals, and buildings that are difficult to clean completely. People fight them with washing, combing, airing powders, herbs, heat, and persistence. Sometimes the pests win anyway. One especially overlooked detail is how much cleaning happens without water. Clothing can be brushed. Bedding can be shaken outdoors. Rooms can be swept. Rugs or textiles can be beaten. Fresh air and sunlight are used deliberately. A house is constantly being defended against dust, smoke, mud, insects, food scraps, soot, and moisture. You look again at the floor. It was clean earlier. Now several muddy footprints have appeared near the entrance. Cleaning never really ends. The same is true of personal washing. You carry another basin toward the door. Its water has turned cloudy. Once it is used, it still has to go somewhere. Wastewater may be thrown onto the yard, garden, drain, or another convenient place depending on the household. There is no hidden pipe carrying it away. Everything remains visible. Fresh water comes in by hand. Dirty water leaves by hand. That rhythm changes the way you understand every cup, basin, and bucket. The afternoon light catches droplets on the rim. You remember the well outside. It provides drinking water, cooking water, washing water, and sometimes water for animals. Its location therefore matters enormously. And somewhere beyond the house, another household structure stands for the opposite purpose. It is usually small. It is often wooden, and nearly everyone must visit it eventually. You carry the empty bucket toward the doorway, following the quiet path that leads from washing to one of the least discussed places in old American life. Section 6. Before you follow that narrow path beyond the back door, evening begins to gather around the house. The daylight that made washing possible is fading from the windows. Work continues for a little longer, but the household is slowly turning inward. Tools are put away. Animals settle. A last armful of wood is carried toward the hearth. Soon another ordinary problem becomes important. Where will everyone sleep? You climb the stairs again, entering the chamber you noticed earlier. In the dim light, the bed looks larger than it did during the morning. Beds are among the most valuable pieces of furniture in many early American homes. A good bedstead mattress, blankets, sheets, curtains, and pillows can represent a considerable investment. In household inventories, beds sometimes appear with surprisingly careful descriptions. There is a reason. A comfortable sleeping place takes work to create. You run your hand across the wooden frame. Depending on the period and household, the mattress may rest upon ropes stretched between the sides of the bedstead. These ropes need attention. As they loosen with use, the mattress begins to sag. Someone must tighten them. The familiar expression about sleeping tight is sometimes popularly connected with rope beds, although historians remain cautious about claiming that the phrase certainly originated there. The explanation is appealing. The evidence is less certain. What is certain is that ropes were widely used beneath bedding before metal springs became common. You press down gently. The bed gives beneath your hand. Now you consider the mattress itself. There is no standard filling. A prosperous household might own a feather bed stuffed with goose or duck feathers. Such a bed can feel wonderfully soft, although maintaining it requires work. Feathers shift. They compress. The mattress must be shaken, turned, and fluffed. Other families sleep on mattresses filled with wool, straw, corn husks, or other materials available locally. The difference in comfort can be enormous. You lie down for a moment on a straw-filled mattress. It rustles beneath you. The texture is firmer than you expect, and every movement creates a dry whisper from inside the ticking. Fresh straw can smell pleasantly grassy at first. Over time it flattens. It may collect dust. It can also provide shelter for insects. Bedding must therefore be refreshed. Family may empty a mattress, clean the covering, and replace the filling when new material becomes available. Even sleeping has a season. Harvest affects the bed. You look toward another one across the room. It may hold several children tonight. Shared sleeping is common, especially when houses are small and families large. 2 siblings might sleep together. Sometimes 3 do. Travelers in inns may occasionally share beds with people they barely know, something you will encounter later on your journey. Within the household, the arrangement feels less surprising. Privacy is limited everywhere. Warmth is more important. During winter, another body beneath the blankets can make a cold room easier to endure. You approach the window. Outside darkness has already taken the yard. The glass feels icy beneath your fingertips. There is no radiator beneath it. No heated air rises through a vent. Unless the bedroom has its own fireplace, warmth from the main room below may be the most you receive. Some families use bed warmers. You find one hanging near the hearth downstairs. It resembles a shallow metal pan with a long handle and a perforated lid. Hot coals can be placed inside, and the pan is moved carefully between sheets before bedtime. For a few minutes, the bed becomes wonderfully warm. But the tool requires caution. A coal that escapes can scorch fabric or start a fire. Some people may instead use heated stones, bricks, or bottles wrapped carefully before placing them beneath the covers. The principle is simple. Bring the warmth to the bed. As you return upstairs, the sheets are cool again. You pull blankets upward. Wool is especially valuable in cold climates because it insulates even when conditions are damp. Quilts and woven coverlets add further layers depending on what the household owns. Bed curtains may surround a wealthier bed. At first they seem decorative, then you understand their practical value. Curtains help trap body heat. They also create a small sense of privacy inside a crowded room. When drawn, they turn the bed into a little enclosed world. The air inside becomes warmer. The sounds outside become softer. For a few hours, the person beneath the blankets has something resembling a room within a room. You close the curtain. The darkness becomes almost complete. Then you feel an itch. This introduces one of the least romantic inhabitants of old bedrooms. Bedbugs are not a modern problem, and they were certainly known in earlier American households. They hide in cracks. Wooden bedsteads provide excellent shelter. Mattress seams, wall joints, and furniture offer more. Fleas and lice create their own difficulties. The presence of such pests does not necessarily mean a household is unusually filthy. In a world of shared sleeping spaces, animals, nearby second-hand furniture, travelers, and limited pest control insects can spread easily. People know exactly what they are. They also try many remedies. Beds may be taken apart. Frames can be scrubbed. Bedding is aired outdoors. Boiling water may be used on cracks. Cracks. Powders, herbs, or strong-smelling substances are sometimes recommended. Household manuals offer treatments that range from practical to doubtful. One unusual remedy found in historical advice involves applying substances such as turpentine or mercury compounds around bedsteads. You would be wise not to imitate it. People often face one danger with another because the long-term effects of such chemicals are poorly understood. You imagine dragging the mattress into sunlight. Fresh air is one of the household's most dependable tools. Sheets flap outside. Pillows are beaten. Mattresses are turned. Windows open when weather allows. Sunlight enters rooms that have been closed through winter. This yearly rhythm of airing and cleaning can be as important as washing itself. Night, however, has returned. You settle beneath the blankets. The house sounds different now. A timber contracts with a small knock. Wind brushes the wall. Somewhere below, a log shifts in the hearth. Another sleeper breathes steadily only a few feet away. Perhaps a baby murmurs. Perhaps someone coughs. There is little insulation from household sound. You hear almost everything. Yet outside the room lies a silence much deeper than most modern nights. No automobile passes. No aircraft crosses overhead. No electrical appliance hums nearby. The world beyond the window is shaped by the wind animals, weather, distant voices, and occasionally the wheels of a late wagon. You notice the mattress beneath you again. It is not perfectly comfortable. A lump presses near your shoulder. The pillow may be smaller than you prefer. Still, after a day of carrying water, tending fire, preparing food, cleaning, sewing, hauling, and walking, sleep probably arrives quickly. Daily labor creates its own sleeping medicine. You close your eyes. For a while, the cold room disappears. The bed becomes the warmest place in the house. Under layers of cloth, beside family members who have repeated these routines hundreds of times, you understand why bedding appears so often in wills and household inventories. A bed is more than furniture. It is warmth. It is property. It is privacy. It is where children are born, illnesses are endured, stories are whispered, and exhausted bodies recover for another working day. Hours pass quietly. Then sometime before dawn you wake. The room is cold again. The fire downstairs has nearly faded, and now another need has become impossible to ignore. There is no bathroom at the end of the hallway. Instead, somewhere beneath the bed may be a ceramic vessel intended for the night. Beyond the back door waits another solution. You pull on your clothes, step carefully onto the cold floor, and prepare to discover why one of the most necessary places in old America was usually located outside. Section 7. The cold floor beneath your feet encourages you to move quickly. You reach beneath the bed and find the vessel you suspected was there. It is a chamber pot. In daylight, it might seem like an awkward household object. In the middle of a freezing night, however, its purpose is immediately understandable. You do not want to cross a dark yard in snow unless you must. The pot may be ceramic, metal, or another durable material. In some homes, it fits neatly beneath a bed or inside a piece of furniture designed to conceal it. During the night, convenience matters more than elegance. By morning, someone must empty it. That task leads you back toward the yard. You pull on heavier clothing and open the door. Cold air presses against your face. The ground may be muddy, frozen, or wet with dew, depending on the season. The small outbuilding you are walking towards stands apart from the house. This is the privy. You might also hear it called a necessary house, back house, outhouse, or by another local name. It is rarely luxurious. A simple wooden structure may contain a bench with one or more openings cut into it. Beneath lies a pit vault or another arrangement meant to collect waste. You step inside. Light enters through gaps between boards. The air is cooler than the house and carries an unmistakable smell. There is no porcelain bowl. No running water waits nearby. No hidden pipe carries anything away. Everything depends on gravity, distance, soil cleaning, and patience. You sit for only a moment before understanding why weather shapes even this part of life. In summer, the privy can be hot. Flies gather. Mosquitoes may find you. In winter, the seat can become painfully cold. Rain turns the path muddy. Snow makes the walk longer. At night, darkness makes every step uncertain. The location therefore matters. Too close to the house and odors become a problem. Too far away and every visit becomes inconvenient. There is another concern. The well. You remember the clean-looking water you carried earlier. A poorly placed privy can contaminate groundwater, especially if the pit is too close to a well or if local soil allows waste to travel easily through it. People understand some practical relationships between foul waste and illness long before they understand bacteria, but they do not yet possess modern germ theory. This creates a dangerous gap between experience and explanation. You may recognize that bad smells, dirty water, or crowded conditions are unhealthy without knowing exactly why. In growing towns and cities, the problem becomes much larger. One family privy creates manageable waste. Hundreds do not. Thousands create something else entirely. You leave the small building and imagine a 19th century town street. Behind rows of houses stand privies, stables, kitchens, workshops, sheds and wells. Animals contribute manure. Household wastewater is thrown into yards, gutters, or drains. Rain moves everything. So does gravity. In dense neighborhoods, sanitation can become a constant struggle. Some cities rely on workers who empty privies and cesspools. This unpleasant occupation is often performed at night when streets are quieter and odors less likely to disturb daytime business. The material they remove is sometimes called night soil. The name sounds almost gentle. The work is not. Workers shovel or pump waste into barrels and carts, then carry it away for disposal or possible use as fertilizer. You hear wooden wheels moving through a dark street. A horse pulls slowly. The smell passes long before the cart disappears. This is one of those forgotten occupations that keeps a community functioning, while remaining almost invisible in polite descriptions of the past. Waste does not vanish because people prefer not to discuss it. Someone handles it. Always. Back at the farmhouse, you notice a bucket of ashes near the privy. Ash earth, lime, sawdust, or other dry materials may sometimes be added to pits to reduce odor and moisture. Practices vary greatly. Some households manage privies carefully, others do not. Historians can examine archaeological remains, municipal records, building plans, diaries, and sanitation reports. but the daily condition of an ordinary family outhouse is much harder to reconstruct. The cleanest and dirtiest examples leave stronger stories than the average ones. Once again, ordinary life hides between the records. You look down beside the wooden bench. Modern toilet paper has not yet become an everyday household product. That means people use whatever is practical and available. Scraps of paper may serve the purpose. So can old newspapers once they become common enough. Earlier, households might use cloth leaves, corn cobs, soft plant material, or other locally available substitutes. One especially famous association links American outhouses with mail-order catalogues. Thick catalogues from companies such as Sears later become common household objects, and old pages can be reused in many ways after their shopping purpose ends. Stories about catalogues hanging in privies become part of American folklore. Some certainly were reused there. Exactly how universal the practice became is difficult to know. People rarely kept detailed records of which page disappeared into an outhouse. You smile at the thought. History preserves presidents' speeches more carefully than it preserves the final destination of last year's catalogue. Yet both belong to the same country. You leave the privy and notice the path beneath your feet. It is worn smooth. That tells its own story. Everyone has walked here. Children, parents, visitors, hired workers, perhaps generations of the same family. The route is as ordinary as the path to the well. Inside the house chamber pots create another layer of work. Someone empties them. Someone rinses them. Someone deals with the smell. In wealthier household, servants may perform this task. In modest homes, family members do it themselves. Bedrooms may also contain wash basin, pitchers, and slop jars. The absence of a modern bathroom does not mean bodily needs disappear. Instead, the functions of a bathroom are divided among several places and objects. You wash at a basin. You bathe in a portable tub. You use a chamber pot at night. You visit the privy during the day. Water comes from outside. Waste goes somewhere else. The system is scattered through the household. Only later will plumbing pull these activities into one dedicated room. You return toward the kitchen. A wooden bucket stands near the door. Now you look at it differently. One bucket may carry clean water. Another may carry dirty water. The difference is crucial even when the containers look nearly identical. Keeping them separate requires habit. So does protecting food from flies and animals. Sanitation depends on countless small decisions rather than a single technology. You sweep crumbs. You cover milk. You air bedding. You carry waste away. You place the well uphill if possible. You clean vessels. You hope the summer heat does not overwhelm your precautions. Life becomes a quiet negotiation with things. That is perhaps the strangest part. Microbes surround the household, but nobody knows they exist in the modern sense for much of the era you are exploring. People can see mud. They can smell decay. They can watch flies gather. But the invisible world remains invisible. As medical knowledge changes during the 19th century, this hidden world slowly begins to reshape cities. Homes, wells, drains, sewers, and public health. For now, however, morning continues. You close the back door. The hearth is warm again. Someone has already begun another round of chores. Then you hear lighter footsteps across the floor. A child appears dressed for the day. Another follows. They are expected to help sooner than you might imagine. They carry wood, fetch, water, mind, younger siblings gather eggs and learn household tasks by doing them. Old America has no sharp wall separating childhood from responsibility. And as you watch the children move into the morning, you begin to follow them toward a world of chores, games, discipline work, and surprisingly early independence. Section 8. The child standing near the hearth does not seem to be waiting for entertainment. There is work to do. Before breakfast is fully cleared, one child carries kindling toward the fire. Another steps outside with a small bucket. Somewhere near the doorway, an older sister is already helping a younger child into clothing. I begin to understand that childhood in old America often arrives with responsibility very early. The exact age depends on family, region, wealth, and circumstance. A child in a prosperous town household may spend more time at lessons. A child on a farm may spend more hours helping with animals, crops, food, and fuel. But very few children are expected to remain completely separate from the work of the household. You follow a boy into the yard. He is still small enough that the bucket he carries looks slightly oversized in his hands. His task is simple. Gather eggs. He crosses toward the chickens while the morning air remains cool. Feathers stir inside the coop. A hen protests softly as he reaches beneath her. The work is not difficult today. Other days are harder. Children may carry water, gather wood, weed gardens, watch livestock collect berries, shell beans, turn spinning wheels, card wool, sweep floors, or help prepare food. Older children often care for younger ones. That responsibility can last for hours. You notice a girl holding a toddler near the doorway while an adult continues another task nearby. She is not acting as a visitor. She is part of the cultural process. Household labor system. This is one well-established feature of family life across much of early America. Children contribute. Their work is shaped by age and ability, but it is real work. Modern ideas about childhood as a long protected period develop unevenly over time. You step into another room. A small wooden object rests on the floor. It is a toy horse. Someone carved it by hand. Children certainly play even when they work. You find dolls made from cloth, corn husks, wood wax, or other available materials. There may be hoops spinning, tops marbles, whistles, balls, simple puzzles, and homemade games. A stick can become almost anything. So can an empty field. You follow several children outside after their chores are finished. They run toward a fence. Their laughter carries across the yard. Games need few manufactured objects. Children race. They hide. They throw stones toward a mark. They chase one another around trees. In winter they may slide across frozen ground or pull makeshift sleds. In summer, streams and ponds become places of exploration. Play follows whatever the landscape provides. I begin to notice how much freedom some children possess outside adult supervision. This is not because adults are unconcerned. It is partly because adults are busy. Work fills the day. Children therefore learn to move through familiar spaces on their own. They know which animals to avoid. They know where the creek becomes deep. They know which neighbour is likely to offer a biscuit and which fence should not be climbed. This independence can seem surprising to you, yet it grows from necessity. You walk farther down the road with them. Shoes become another detail. Some children own sturdy footwear. Others may go barefoot during warm weather to preserve shoes for colder months or formal occasions. Leather shoes are valuable. Feet grow quickly. A family does not always want to replace footwear more often than necessary. Bare feet become practical. You feel dust rising from the road. The children barely notice it. Their feet are accustomed to the ground. You turn back toward the house as midday approaches. Inside discipline has its own place. Parents often expect obedience, useful behavior, and respect toward elders. Religious beliefs can strongly shape ideas about raising children. So can local customs. Punishments vary widely. Some families use physical punishment. Others rely more on scolding, extra work, loss of privileges, or public correction. The records preserve many opinions about discipline, but they cannot tell you exactly how warm, strict, distant, or affectionate every household truly was. That remains one of history's quieter uncertainties. Advice books describe ideals. Real families are more complicated. You notice evidence of affection everywhere if you look carefully. A small knitted cap has been repaired several times. A father has carved initials into a toy. A mother saves a lock of hair. A letter from an older child is folded and kept. People may express love differently than you expect, but attachment is not absent. Children are worried over. They are taught. They are mourned. They are teased gently. They are remembered. You hear someone reciting letters beside the window. Education begins at home for many children. A parent or older sibling may teach reading, writing, prayers, numbers, or practical skills before formal schooling begins. Books can be scarce. A Bible primer, almanac, or borrowed text may serve many purposes. Paper is valuable enough that beginners sometimes practice on slates rather than wasting sheets. Even literacy itself is uneven. Some communities achieve high reading rates. Others provide fewer opportunities. Gender, race, wealth, religion, region, and legal status all influence who learns what. For enslaved children, access to formal education may be deliberately restricted or forbidden in many places and periods. For indigenous children, education can range from traditional community teaching to later institutions designed to suppress native languages and customs. There is no single American childhood. That is essential to remember. You are walking through many overlapping Americas. The life of a merchant's child in Boston does not match the life of a farm child in Kentucky. Neither matches the life of an enslaved child in Virginia, or a child growing up in a Pueblo community in the Southwest. Yet all of them learn through daily participation. Children watch adults. They imitate. They practice. Knowledge passes from hand to hand. You see this clearly when an older child begins teaching a younger one how to sew. The first stitches are uneven. No one seems surprised. Skill arrives slowly. The same is true of milking, cooking, chopping wood, tending animals, spinning thread, repairing tools, and navigating roads. A childhood filled with chores is also a long apprenticeship in survival. You step outside once more. Afternoon light stretches across the yard. A group of children has found time to play again. One is rolling a hoop with a stick. Another crouches beside the dirt drawing shapes. A younger child carries a doll made from scraps of fabric. Nothing they hold is expensive. that does not make the game less serious. One unusual detail appears when you look at toys found by archaeologists. Small objects sometimes imitate adult tools. Miniature dishes, tiny furniture, toy tools, and handmade animals suggest that children often recreated the working world around them during play. They practiced adulthood before reaching it. You watch a little wooden cart cross the floor. Its wheels are imperfect. The child pushing it does not care. For several minutes, the household becomes a miniature version of the larger world. Then an adult calls. Play stops. There is another chore. The sun has moved lower and everyone must finish before darkness returns. You follow the children as they gather kindling once more. This repetition is the hidden rhythm of their lives. Work, play, learning, more work. The boundaries between them remain soft. By evening, the same child who carried eggs at sunrise may have learned a new word, watched a younger sibling, weeded a garden row, invented a game, and carried wood back to the hearth. No one writes this day down. It seems too ordinary. Tomorrow may look almost the same, and yet these small routines are shaping an entire generation. Soon some of these children will leave the house in the morning, carrying slates books or nothing more than lessons memorized by repetition. Their road will lead toward another modest building where ages mix together beneath one roof. As evening settles over the yard, you can already imagine the sound of benches scraping across a wooden floor. A school day is waiting. Section 9. Morning comes with the scrape of shoes against a wooden doorstep. You leave the house carrying a slate, a small book, and perhaps a wrapped piece of food for midday. The air is cool enough that your breath briefly appears before you. Other children are already walking along the road. Some come from nearby farms. Others have walked much farther. There is no yellow school bus waiting beyond the gate. If your school is several miles away, you travel there on foot unless a horse or wagon happens to be available. The road changes with the weather. In summer, dust gathers around your ankles. After rain, the path becomes soft and muddy. Winter makes the journey sharper. Snow gathers along fences, puddles freeze, and cold wind moves freely across open fields. School attendance therefore depends partly on the season. Farm work matters too. Older children may be needed during planting, harvesting, haymaking, or other busy periods. A family cannot always spare every pair of useful hands. This means attendance can be irregular. You may attend steadily during winter, and less often when fields require labour. The schoolhouse appears ahead. It is smaller than many modern classrooms. You step through the door. The smell reaches you immediately. There is wood smoke from the stove, chalk dust, damp wool, ink, old paper, and the faint earthy scent carried in on dozens of shoes. Light enters through several windows. On dark days, the room can feel dim. Artificial lighting is limited, so school hours often follow daylight closely. You notice the benches. They are simple. Some have backs, others do not. Children of many ages share the same room, which means the teacher is not instructing one uniform class. You may sit beside someone several years older. A much younger child recites letters nearby. Across the room, another pupil is already working through arithmetic. This mixed arrangement creates one of the defining features of the one-room school. Everyone hears almost everything. You listen while younger pupils recite the alphabet. Later they listen while older children struggle through geography or fractions. Learning happens partly by overhearing. The room becomes a shared reservoir of repeated information. At the front stands the teacher. The teacher may be a young man during one period and a young woman during another. By the 19th century, women become increasingly important in American teaching, especially as public education expands. The profession is not usually luxurious. Pay can be modest. Teachers may board with local families rather than maintain their own homes. In some districts, this means moving from household to household throughout the term. Imagine teaching all day, then carrying your belongings to another family's spare room. It is an unusual arrangement, yet it allows communities to provide lodging when cash is limited. You take your place. Your slate rests across your knees. Paper costs money, so reusable slates make practical sense for arithmetic, spelling, and handwriting practice. A small piece of slate pencil scratches across the dark surface. The sound is dry and sharp. You solve a problem. Then you wipe it away. Nothing remains. Countless lessons disappear this way, written and erased before anyone thinks to preserve them. You open a primer. Books are often shared. A school may not possess enough identical texts for every pupil, especially in poorer districts. Children can arrive carrying whatever books their families already own. This creates an untidy classroom by modern standards. Primer. Another uses a Bible. Someone else may have a spelling book or a reader passed down through siblings. The teacher must somehow make it work. Memorization becomes extreme. You repeat words aloud. Others do the same. The schoolroom grows surprisingly noisy. Modern classrooms often associate quiet with learning, but recitation can fill older schools with overlapping voices. Children spell. They read passages. They chant multiplication facts. They repeat rules. The sound becomes rhythmic. You hear dozens of young voices rising and falling against wooden walls. A stove pops in the middle of the room. Someone adds another piece of wood. Keeping that stove burning can become part of school life. Families may be expected to provide fuel, or pupils may help bring wood inside. On a cold morning, your seat location matters. Too close to the stove and you become uncomfortably warm. Too far away and your fingers remain cold enough to make writing difficult. The room never seems evenly heated. Your coat may stay on for part of the lesson. Near the windows, drafts move through cracks. You rub your hands together. Then the teacher calls your group forward. You stand beside several children of similar ability. This is your recitation. Instead of listening to a long lecture, you demonstrate what you have prepared. You spell a word. The teacher corrects you. Another pupil tries. You continue until the group is dismissed back to its seats. Discipline is usually direct. Rules vary from school to school, but obedience, punctuality, neatness, and attention receive strong emphasis. Corporal punishment exists in many schools and is widely accepted during much of the period, though methods and frequency differ greatly. Some teachers are severe. Others are patient. Some communities complain about excessive harshness. Others complain when teachers cannot control older pupils. The surviving records reveal arguments about discipline, but they cannot tell you how every ordinary classroom actually felt. Much depends on one teacher. You sense that uncertainty clearly. A schoolhouse can be warm and encouraging under one person, then intimidating under the next. There is no single experience. By midday lesson pause, you step outside. The bright air feels fresh after the smoky room. Lunch may be simple. Bread, cheese, cold meat, a piece of fruit when the season allows. Perhaps you eat something left from breakfast. Children gather near a fence or beneath a tree. For a short time, the schoolyard becomes a place for games. You chase one another. You throw a ball. You trade small treasures. A polished stone can be valuable among children. So can a button, string, marble, or bit of coloured glass. Then the teacher calls everyone back. Afternoon brings more reading, penmanship, grammar, geography, and arithmetic depending on age and period. Writing with ink requires care. You dip a pen too deeply and create a blot. The teacher notices immediately. Ink stains fingers. It stains desks too. Some desks carry initials scratched by generations of pupils who clearly found their attention wandering. You run your fingertip across one. A name remains. The child who carved it has long disappeared. This tiny act of boredom survived. So many other moments did not. You look around the room again. Education here is limited in ways that matter. Not every child has equal access. Race, wealth, location, gender, and local law shape opportunities dramatically. Enslaved children in many places are denied formal education, sometimes by explicit legal restrictions. Free black communities establish schools under difficult conditions, often facing discrimination and inadequate resources. Indigenous children experience very different educational traditions, while later government and missionary schools attempt to replace native languages and cultures. Even among white rural families, schooling can be inconsistent. The idea of universal public education grows gradually rather than appearing fully formed. Still, the little schoolhouse represents something powerful. Communities repeatedly decide that children should learn beyond the boundaries of the home. They contribute money. They contribute wood. They build a room. They hire someone to teach. The result is imperfect but important. Late afternoon light begins leaning across the desks. Lessons end. Books close. Slates are gathered. You step outside with the others. The road home stretches beneath a pale sky. Your shoes pick up dust again. You carry perhaps one new word, one arithmetic rule, and one spelling correction back toward the house. Tomorrow you may return, or farm work may keep you away. For now the road passes another building that gathers people for very different reasons. Its windows display tools, cloth barrels, jars and goods from places you may never see yourself. A bell hangs above the door. You hear it ring as someone enters. The general store is open. Section 10. The bell above the door gives a small metallic ring as you step inside. For a moment the general store feels darker than the road outside. Your eyes adjust slowly. Shelves rise along the walls, barrels stand near the counter. Bolts of cloth are stacked beside boxes, jars, tools, sacks and tins. The room smells of coffee, leather, flour, tobacco, soap, wood, and whatever arrived most recently in a crate. It is not simply a shop. It is one of the places where the wider world enters town. You move toward the counter. A shopkeeper looks up from a ledger. Behind him are goods that may have travelled farther than many local customers ever will. Tea might have crossed an ocean. Sugar may have come through distant ports. Coffee has travelled from warmer climates. Manufactured tools arrive from cities. Fabric may have passed through several merchants before reaching this quiet wooden building. I begin to see the store as a meeting point between local life and a much larger economy. Farm families bring in what they produce. They purchase what they cannot easily make. The exchange is rarely as simple as handing over money. Cash can be scarce, especially in rural communities and earlier periods. Customers may use credit. They may trade butter, eggs, grain hides, timber products, or other goods according to local custom. The shopkeeper records debts carefully. You lean over the ledger. Names appear beside columns of numbers. Family buys fabric, salt nails, and perhaps coffee. Payment may come weeks or months later. This system depends heavily on trust. The shopkeeper knows who owns which farm, who usually pays after harvest, and who has been promising to settle an account for far too long. The store remembers everyone. You move toward a barrel. Its lid has been opened. Inside may be flour crackers, sugar-dried beans, or another bulk product. Many goods do not arrive in convenient individual packages. They are measured out. The customer asks for an amount, and the shopkeeper weighs or scoops it into papercloth, a container brought from home, or whatever wrapping is suitable. You hear the rustle of brown paper. String tightens around a parcel. Waste is minimal because packaging itself has value. Barrels, boxes, tins, bottles, sacks, and wrapping materials often find second lives around the household. Nothing leaves the store entirely empty of future possibilities. You walk along the shelves. There are nails sold by weight, needles, buttons, thread, lamp oil, candles, soap, boots, combs, knives, pots, patent medicines, perhaps a few books. The inventory changes with location and decade. A frontier store may carry supplies essential for settlement. A town store near the end of the 19th century may offer an increasingly broad range of manufactured products. This is one well-established transformation in American daily life. As transportation improves, ordinary households gain access to goods produced far beyond their immediate communities. Railroads accelerate that change dramatically. For them, a rural store depends more heavily on wagons, rivers, canals, coastal shipping, or seasonal routes. After railway lines spread, merchandise can arrive faster and more regularly. You pick up a tin cup. It looks simple, yet the ease with which such an object reaches your hand reflects roads, factories, warehouses, merchants, and transport networks extending far beyond the town. You set it down again. Near the counter, several people are talking. This is another reason the general store matters. It is a place for news. Someone has heard about a neighbor's new barn. Someone else knows which road washed out after the rain. A traveler has brought information from the county seat. Perhaps a newspaper has arrived. People gather around it. Not everyone buys a personal copy. One paper can circulate through several hands. You may hear articles read aloud for customers who cannot read easily or who simply prefer to listen. The store becomes a small newsroom. It also becomes a place for rumor. That difference is not always obvious. You hear a confident story about someone 3 towns away. No one can confirm it. Still, everyone remembers it. Historians can trace newspapers, store ledgers, advertisements, and commercial records with considerable precision, but the everyday conversations surrounding them are mostly lost. You can reconstruct what people purchased more easily than what they whispered while purchasing it. That uncertainty gives the store a strange prominence in the historical record. The shelves survive in photographs. The gossip does not. You walk toward a wooden case. Inside are medicines. Their labels make impressive promises. The 19th century becomes famous for patent medicines and proprietary remedies advertised for a remarkable range of complaints. Some contain alcohol. Some contain opiates or other potent ingredients. Others are mostly mixtures of herbs, flavoring, and confident marketing. Regulation is limited compared with later standards. A bottle may promise relief from headaches, stomach troubles, weakness, coughs, sleeplessness, or several problems at once. You read the wording carefully. It sounds reassuring. Whether the medicine truly helps is another question. An unusual detail of old stores is that certain remedies can contain ingredients that modern customers would never expect to purchase so casually. The line between medicine and potentially dangerous substance is far less clearly controlled. You return the bottle to the shelf. Nearby sits a jar of candy. Children notice this area quickly. Penny candy later becomes a familiar feature of American stores offering small sweets that can be purchased individually for very little money. A child who has spent the morning gathering eggs or carrying wood may stand here studying the choices as seriously as an adult examines tools. You watch a coin disappear across the counter. A piece of candy returns. For a few moments, commerce becomes happiness wrapped in paper. You continue farther inside. A stove stands near the center of the room. During winter, customers gather around it. Chairs may form a loose circle. Men sit longer than necessary. They discuss crops, roads, politics, livestock, weather, prices, marriages, illnesses, and anyone who has recently done something worth discussing. A store can function almost like an informal club. But who feels welcome varies by place and time. Race, gender, class, local, custom and segregation shape who enters freely, who gathers socially, and who is treated as an equal customer. The friendly image of the village store never tells the whole story. Old America contains hospitality and exclusion side by side. You look toward the door again. Another customer enters carrying a letter. In some small communities, the store may also connect people to the postal system. Post offices are sometimes located inside general stores or operated by storekeepers. Mail arrives less frequently than you expect. That makes its arrival an event. A letter from a distant relative can change the atmosphere of an entire household. So can a catalogue. By the late 19th century, mail-order businesses begin bringing an enormous new world of shopping into rural homes. Catalogue pages offer clothing tools, furniture, watches, musical instruments, household equipment, and thousands of other items. You do not need a nearby city. The city can come to you by post and rail. That change happens gradually, but its effect is profound. Local shops now compete with distant companies. Households begin seeing products they never knew existed. Desire expands. So does choice. You stand near a stack of printed advertisements. The old store suddenly feels like a doorway between two eras. On one side is a local economy of barter, repair, homemade goods and familiar merchants. On the other is a nation increasingly connected by the factories, catalogues, railways, standardized products and advertising. For now both worlds occupy the same room. You hear the bell again. A farmer enters for 4 nails. A child studies the candy jar. The shopkeeper opens his ledger. Someone unfolds a newspaper beside the stove. Outside, a wagon rattles past. You realize that an ordinary purchase can carry an entire community around it. A pound of sugar brings trade routes. A needle brings industry. A letter brings distance. A newspaper brings the outside world. And the people who move all these objects through town depend on an army of workers whose occupations are slowly disappearing from memory. Some light lamps, some sharpen blades, some repair kettles, some deliver ice, some climb chimneys. You step back onto the road as the store bell fades behind you. Ahead, the town is already busy, and if you listen carefully, you can hear its forgotten workers everywhere. Section 11. You hear the town before you fully see its workers. Metal rings against metal somewhere beyond the general store. A wagon creaks over uneven ground. A broom scrapes across a wooden walkway, and farther down the street someone calls to a horse. The town is already busy, yet many of the people keeping it alive perform jobs that will eventually disappear. You follow the sound of hammering first. A blacksmith shop stands with its doors open. Warm air reaches you before you enter. Inside, the smell is thick with coal smoke, hot iron, leather, sweat, and damp earth. Sparks flash briefly near the forge, then disappear almost as quickly as they appeared. The blacksmith lifts a glowing piece of metal. His hammer falls. The sound fills the building. You feel it through the floor. Blacksmiths do far more than shoe horses. They repair. Wagon parts, shape hinges, make hooks, mend tools, produce nails, adjust metal fittings, and solve countless mechanical problems for people who cannot simply order a replacement. This is one well-established fact of older American communities. Repair matters more than replacement. A broken tool is not necessarily finished. Someone may straighten it. Someone may weld or reshape it. Someone may replace only the damaged part. You watch a farmer place an old iron fitting on the workbench. The blacksmith turns it over in his hand. Nothing is wasted before its usefulness is truly exhausted. You step back into daylight. A different worker is moving along the street carrying a ladder. If evening were approaching, he might be a lamplighter. Before electric street lights become common, many towns depend on oil or gas lamps that must be lit by hand. Someone walks from lamp to lamp and opens each lantern. He trims a wick if needed and lights the flame. By morning, he may return to extinguish it. You imagine following him at dusk. The street grows darker between each pool of light. One flame appears, then another. The job has a gentle rhythm, yet it is also essential. Without him, nighttime street remain far darker. Lamplighters become so familiar in some towns that residents recognize their routes and schedules by habit. Then electricity spreads. The worker who once brought light by hand slowly becomes unnecessary. You continue toward another shop. A painted sign hangs above the door. Inside, a man sharpens knives, scissors, and tools. Professional grinders, tinkers, and itinerant repairers once moved through communities offering services that seem unusual today. A tinker may repair pots and pans. A knife grinder sharpens blades. An umbrella repairer appears in later cities. A clock repairer works with tiny gears under bright window light. The number of specialized trades grows because household objects are expected to last. You bring damaged things to people who know how to restore them. You do not always throw them away. You move farther down the street and hear a bell. A man is calling from a wagon. This time he's selling ice. The sight feels strange because the day is warm. Large blocks rest beneath heavy covering. Before mechanical refrigeration becomes common in American homes, natural ice becomes an important industry. In winter, workers cut thick ice from frozen lakes and ponds. The blocks are moved into ice houses and packed beneath insulating material such as sawdust. Months later, some of that winter cold reaches families during summer. You stand beside the wagon. Water runs slowly from the melting edge here. The ice smells faintly of wood and wet sawdust. Customers buy pieces sized for household ice boxes. The iceman carries them inside using large tongs. This becomes such a familiar household visit that children may watch for the wagon. One unusual detail is how far natural ice can travel. During the 19th century, American merchant ship harvested ice considerable distances, even to warmer regions and overseas markets. Imagine that. A frozen New England pond becomes part of summer life somewhere far away. The trade seems almost impossible until you remember the power of insulation and careful storage. Still, exactly how clean natural ice remained could vary. Ice might be harvested from water affected by animals, industry, or urban waste. People did not always agree about the risks. You leave the melting wagon behind. Another worker is climbing onto a roof. He carries brushes and rods. The chimney sweep has arrived. Soot accumulates inside chimneys. If too much builds up, it can reduce draft and increase the danger of chimney fires. Cleaning therefore matters. The work is dirty. Soot settles on clothing, hair, hands, and face. In large cities during earlier periods, chimney sweeping could involve harsh labor practices, especially where children were used to climb narrow flues. American practices varied by place and time, and historians do not always have complete records of how commonly children were employed in every community. The uncertainty is important. Some occupations leave far fewer personal accounts than official trades do. You may know that the chimney was cleaned without ever learning who climbed inside it. You walk toward a larger street. A man carries a long pole. Perhaps he's a sign painter. Nearby another repairs harnesses. Farther along, someone makes barrels. A cooper's shop smells strongly of fresh wood. Barrels are everywhere in old commerce. Flour travels in barrels. Apples do. Liquids do. Salted meat does. Hardware can. The cooper shapes curved wooden staves and fits them together with hoops. His work becomes almost invisible because the container seems less interesting than whatever it holds. Yet without containers, trade becomes much harder. You tap a barrel lightly. The wood gives a hollow answer. Across the road, another craft produces something even easier to overlook. Shoes. A shoemaker or cord wainer measures feet, cuts leather shapes, soles, stitches, parts together, and repairs worn footwear. Shoes are valuable enough that repair is routine. A cobbler may replace soles or heels several times. Children's shoes can be passed down. A good pair travels through years of mud, snowfields, streets, churches, schools, and farmyards. I begin looking at ordinary objects differently. Every object carries a worker. A candle carries the chandlery. A barrel carries the cooper. A horseshoe carries the blacksmith. A coat carries the tailor. A saddle carries the harness maker. A newspaper carries printers, compositors, and delivery workers. Even waking in the morning depends on other people's hands. As cities grow larger during the 19th century, new occupations appear. You hear another wagon. This one may belong to a milkman. Fresh milk is delivered directly to households before refrigeration and supermarkets transform the system. Another wagon collects laundry. Another delivers bread. Another removes waste. A rag collector purchases or gathers discarded cloth and paper for reuse. A bone collector may find value in materials modern households would immediately discard. Recycling is not yet described with modern language. It simply makes economic sense. Old cloth becomes paper. Bones can enter industrial processes. Metal scraps are sold. Bottles are reused. Useful waste is money. You turn down a narrower lane. A woman bends over a washtub. Her work is less visible than the blacksmith's, but no less demanding. Laundresses often wash clothing for other households in exchange for payment. Steam rises around her. Her hands remain in hot water for hours. She lifts heavy wet fabric. She scrubs, rinses, wrings, dries, starches, and irons. The work continues regardless of whether anyone writes her name into a town history. Many hidden occupations are like this. They happen behind houses, inside kitchens, in sheds, in alleys. They support the visible town without becoming part of its proudest photographs. You pause near the end of the street. The afternoon has grown quieter. The blacksmith is still hammering. The iceman's wagon is farther away now. Someone sweeps sawdust from a doorway. Soon electricity factories, refrigeration, motor vehicles, standardized goods, and modern plumbing will erase or transform many of these jobs. But for now, the town depends on them. Every broken hinge, dark street, dull knife, cold pantry, smoky chimney, torn shoe, and stained shirt belongs to someone's livelihood. You continue walking. At the edge of town, the road stretches outward between fields. A stagecoach has stopped near an inn. A wagon waits beside it. Beyond them lies mud, distance, weather, and uncertainty. The workers of the town have shown you how things are repaired and delivered. Now the road will show you how slowly people themselves once moved. Section 12. The road leaves town almost without ceremony. One moment you're passing shops, workshops, and familiar doorways. The next houses become scattered, fences stretch farther apart, and the packed earth beneath your feet begins winding toward places you cannot yet see. Travel in old America is rarely casual. Distance has weight. A journey of 20 miles can consume most of a day. Weather can change everything. A broken wheel, swollen river, exhausted horse, or muddy road may delay you longer than expected. I'll begin on horseback. The saddle creaks beneath you as the town fades behind. For many Americans, horses provide the fastest practical way to travel across ordinary roads. A rider can move more freely than a wagon, especially where routes are narrow or badly maintained. But even riding demands endurance. The road is uneven. Tree roots push through the earth. Loose stones shift beneath hooves. After-rain wheels and animals churn the surface into mud. You quickly understand why travelers talk about roads so often. A good road is memorable. A terrible one is unforgettable. Many early roads begin as indigenous trails, local paths, military routes, or simple tracks connecting settlements. As towns grow, communities widen and improve them. Sometimes they do not improve them very much. Maintenance can depend on local authorities, landowners, or residents required to contribute labor. The result varies enormously. You read through a section where the ground has dried into deep ruts. A wagon ahead rocks from side to side. His driver keeps one hand on the reins and another near the brake. Inside, passengers are learning what stagecoach travel truly feels like. You climb aboard at the next stop. The interior is smaller than you expect. Several strangers sit close together. Your shoulders touch. Baggage is tied outside or carried wherever space allows. The coach begins moving. Immediately you feel every imperfection in the road. There are no smooth highways. The body rises, falls, twists, and jolts with the vehicle. Conversation becomes difficult over rough ground. Sleep is possible only if exhaustion defeats discomfort. Stagecoaches can connect towns on scheduled routes carrying passengers, mail, and news. That schedule, however, remains vulnerable to reality. Mud slows horses, snow blocks roads, bridges fail, streams rise, animals tire. Travelers wait. You stop at a relay station where fresh horses are prepared. The change can happen quickly when a route is well organized. Teams matter because no horse can maintain a demanding pace indefinitely. The coach moves again. Dust enters through openings during dry weather. Rain finds its way inside during wet weather. In winter, cold air settles around your feet. You pull your coat tighter. There is a strange intimacy to the journey. People who have never met share several uncomfortable hours together. You hear fragments of lives. Someone is visiting family. Someone is traveling for business. Someone carries legal papers. Another passenger is moving permanently westward. The road collects stories, but almost none are written down. Historians know the major routes, toll systems, fares, travel times, and coach companies from surviving records. What they cannot always recover is how a particular ride felt on an ordinary Tuesday after heavy rain. That experience vanished with the passengers. You feel it now through your aching back. Farther ahead stands a gate across the road. A tollkeeper appears. This is a turnpike. Private companies and local authorities sometimes build improved roads and charge travelers for using them. The toll helps maintain the route. At least that is the idea. The road beyond the gate is somewhat better. You notice drainage, ditches, firmer surfaces, and fewer dangerous holes. Still, improved is relative. Travel remains slow. The landscape changes gradually rather than rushing past. You have time to notice farms, stone walls, streams, orchards, woods, and distant church steeples. This slowness affects your understanding of geography. Places feel farther apart because reaching them requires effort. A neighboring county can seem distant. A city several days away belongs to another world. Then water offers another possibility. You leave the coach near a canal. The scene becomes unexpectedly calm. A long, narrow boat moves across still water, while a horse or mule walks along a towpath beside it. Compared with the stagecoach, the motion feels gentle. Canals transformed travel and trade during the early 19th century. The Erie Canal, completed in 1825, becomes the most famous American example linking the Hudson River with the Great Lakes and helping reshape commerce, migration, and settlement. But today you are less interested in national transformation than in the sensation of moving. The boat glides. Water taps softly against the hull. Ropes tighten. Hooves strike the towpath in a steady rhythm. Passengers can stand, talk, eat, and sometimes sleep without being thrown against one another by every rut. The pace is slow. That is the price of comfort. You pass through a lock. The boat enters a narrow chamber. Gates close behind. Water rises gradually. For a few minutes, the entire vessel seems to float upward through the landscape. This small mechanical miracle must have felt astonishing to first-time travellers. The gates open. You continue. Canal travel brings its own discomforts. Cabins may be cramped. Mosquitoes gather in warm weather. Meals can be simple. Sleeping arrangements are crowded. Still, compared with terrible roads, the smooth water feels luxurious. Eventually, however, another sound enters American travel. A whistle. You reach a railway station later in the century. Steam hangs in the air. The engine breathes like a machine much larger than anything in the town you left behind. Early railway travel is noisy, smoky, and sometimes uncomfortable, but it changes the meaning of distance. A journey that once required days can shrink dramatically. You climb into a passenger car. Wooden seats line the interior. The wheels begin moving. The rhythm is unlike the stagecoach. Clack. Pause. Clack again. The landscape begins, passing faster than feels natural. Trees blur slightly. Farmhouses appear and disappear. You smell coal smoke whenever the wind turns. Soot can drift through open windows and settle on clothing. Rail travellers sometimes emerge noticeably dirtier than when they began. Speed creates its own inconvenience. One unusual detail is that early railroads do not immediately operate under a unified national time system. Towns keep local time based largely on the sun. Railway companies may use their own schedules. As rail networks expand, these differences become confusing enough that standardized time zones are adopted by American railroads in 1883. The clock itself begins changing because people are moving faster. You look out the window. That transformation is profound. Before rail, travel time and distance are linked more tightly to an animals' weather and human endurance. Railways loosen that connection, yet for much of old America, travelers still live in the slower world. They ask whether the river is fordable. They ask whether the road is passable. They ask where the next inn stands. They ask how fresh the horses are. Every journey requires information from people encountered along the way. You depend on strangers. A farmer tells you which bridge is damaged. A ferryman knows the current. An innkeeper knows whether the western road has become mud. Travel is partly navigation and partly conversation. As evening approaches, you leave the railway behind and return to an older road. The light softens across the fields. Your body feels the day. Dust kinks your clothing. Your stomach reminds you that travel requires food as well as patience. Ahead, a wooden sign swings beside the road. Light glows through several windows. Horses stand near a stable. Voices drift from inside. You have reached an inn. It may offer supper. It may offer a bed. Whether that bed belongs entirely to you is another question. You step toward the doorway as the sky darkens, ready to discover what sleeping away from home once meant. Section 13. The inn door opens into warmth. After hours on the road, even a crowded room feels inviting. Firelight moves across rough walls. Wet coats hang near the entrance. Boots leave dark marks on the floor. Somewhere beyond the main room, a pot is still simmering. You smell stew smoke, damp wool, horse leather, and ale. Several travellers have already arrived. Some are eating. Others sit near the fire with cups in their hands, speaking in low voices about roads, weather business, and places you have not yet seen. You step farther inside. An innkeeper looks up. Your first question is simple. Is there a bed? The answer may be yes, but that does not necessarily mean there is a private room. Travellers in old America often stay in taverns, inns, ordinaries, boarding houses, and other lodgings where personal space is limited. A room may contain several beds. A bed may occasionally contain several travellers. This sounds surprising now. To people accustomed to crowded households and expensive accommodation, it can be less remarkable. You may share sleeping space with a relative companion or complete stranger. Privacy is valuable. A place indoors matters more. You follow the innkeeper upstairs. The staircase creaks beneath several generations of footsteps. At the top, a narrow passage leads to a chamber. Inside are 2 beds, a washstand, a chair, and little else. Your room already has occupants. Their coats hang from pegs. 1 pair of boots rests beneath a bed. A traveller is asleep with his back toward the wall. You understand immediately that the room belongs temporarily to whoever needs it. This is one well-established feature of early travel. Private hotel rooms gradually become more common, especially as cities grow and the hotel industry changes during the 19th century. But earlier inns often emphasize shelter, food, and convenience rather than solitude. You place your belongings carefully near the bed. Security requires attention. There is no electronic lock. Doors may have simple latches or keys. Valuable papers, money, watches, and small possessions are best kept close. Travel guides and personal accounts sometimes warn about theft. Yet most nights pass without anything dramatic happening. The greater inconvenience is usually noise. Someone coughs. A bed frame creaks. A traveller returns late. Another rises before dawn. You hear conversation through the wall. The building seems alive even while people are trying to sleep. Before settling down, you return downstairs for supper. The dining arrangement may be communal. A long table fills with travelers at roughly the same time. You sit wherever there is space. Food arrives in shared dishes. There may be bread, meat, vegetables, stew, cheese, potatoes, or regional foods depending on place and season. You do not study a long menu. You eat what the house has prepared. This simplicity makes sense. An innkeeper feeding many unpredictable travelers cannot maintain endless choices. Meals follow availability. You pass a dish to the person beside you. He asks where you are headed. Soon you are listening to advice about a bridge farther west. Another traveler says the road beyond it is poor. Someone else disagrees. The dinner table becomes part meal and part information exchange. Before reliable communication networks, travelers depend heavily on these conversations. An inn gathers news from every direction. Stagecoach drivers know road conditions. Merchants know prices. Farmers know local weather. Postal riders carry rumors from distant towns. You may learn more during supper than from any printed guide. Whether the information is accurate is another matter. Old roads produce old rumors as efficiently as they produce dust. You listen carefully anyway. The inn itself can serve many purposes. In rural communities, a tavern may function as a dining room, meeting place, postal stop, commercial center, and social gathering space. People exchange goods. They arrange transportation. They hear news. Local meetings sometimes take place under the same roof. Travelers come and go constantly. The boundary between public and private life becomes thin. You notice a corner table where two men are conducting business. Nearby, someone is reading a newspaper aloud. At another table, local residents have gathered even though they are not staying overnight. The inn belongs to the road, but also to the community. Later in the 19th century, larger hotels begin offering a different experience. You imagine entering one in a growing city. The lobby is brighter. There may be a desk, bellboys, carpets, chandeliers, reading rooms, dining rooms, and dozens or hundreds of guest chambers. Some urban hotels become symbols of modern comfort. Running water eventually appears. Gaslighting arrives. Later, electricity and elevators transform the building again. But even then, luxury is uneven. A traveler with money occupies one world. A laborer or migrant occupies another. Boarding houses fill much of the space between. You follow that thread into a modest city neighborhood. A boarding house may provide both a room and regular meals. Workers, clerks, widows, students, newcomers, and unmarried adults can live there for weeks, months, or years. The household is neither exactly family nor exactly hotel. You eat with strangers until they stop feeling entirely strange. You learn who returns late. You know whose alarm wakes everyone. You recognize footsteps on the stairs. One unusual detail is how important boarding houses become in expanding 19th century cities. They offer an affordable solution for people who cannot maintain their own households. Yet historians sometimes struggle to reconstruct the emotional texture of boarding life. Census records can show who lived under one roof. Advertisements can reveal prices and rules. Letters occasionally describe complaints. But whether a particular house felt lonely, lively, respectable, uncomfortable, or almost familial often remains uncertain. The official record gives you occupants. It rarely gives you atmosphere. You return to the roadside inn. The fire is lower now. People are preparing for bed. Before climbing upstairs, you visit the stable. Your horse, if you have one, needs lodging too. This is easy to forget. Travelers do not simply feed themselves. Animals require water, hay, grain, grooming, and rest. A good inn is partly judged by its stable. You hear horses shifting in stalls. The smell of hay and manure fills the warmer air. A stable worker moves quietly with a lantern. Tomorrow's journey depends on what happens here tonight. As you return inside, a candle lights your way upstairs. Its flame throws long shadows against the wall. In the room, you discover another small inconvenience. Washing facilities are limited. A pitcher and basin may be provided. You wash your face and hands. Dust from the road turns the water grey. A full bath is another matter entirely. Some larger hotels later offer bathing rooms or tubs for guests. Earlier, travelers often manage with basins, cloths, and whatever water the inn can spare. You undress only as much as comfort and company allow. Then you approach the bed. The sheets look clean. You hope they are. Travelers worry about fleas and bedbugs for good reason. Inns provide perfect opportunities for pests to move from person to person through luggage, clothing, bedding, and furniture. Advice to travelers sometimes includes inspecting beds or protecting belongings. How carefully the average person did this is difficult to know. After a long day on rough roads, exhaustion can defeat caution. You lie down. The mattress dips toward the middle. Another sleeper turns beside you or in the neighboring bed. Outside, a horse stamps. A door closes downstairs. Someone laughs softly, then stops. The inn gradually becomes quiet. You realize that sleeping away from home once required a different kind of trust. You trust the innkeeper. You trust strangers around your belongings. You trust that the food will be there. You trust that tomorrow's horses will be ready. You trust that the road advice you heard is useful. Travel is full of small dependencies. Morning will begin early. Breakfast will be simple. The road will continue. But for a few hours, you belong to this temporary household of strangers. Then through the darkness, you hear a quieter conversation from the room below. Two young people are speaking near the fire. Their families are nearby. Their voices remain careful. A courtship is taking shape under watchful eyes. And as sleep settles over the inn, you begin moving toward another hidden part of everyday life where romance depends on parlours, letters, visits, dances, and patience. Section 14. The conversation near the inn's fire remains soft enough that you almost miss it. A young man sits with his hands folded around a cup. Across from him, a young woman listens while pretending not to notice that several relatives are only a few steps away. Nothing about the scene looks especially romantic. That is partly the point. Courtship in old America is often shaped by families, reputation, distance, religion, work, and the simple fact that privacy is difficult to find. You sit quietly nearby. The fire has burned low. Candlelight softens the edges of the room. Outside horses shift in the stable and wind brushes against the shutters. The couple speaks carefully. A private conversation may happen in public. I begin to understand how different romance feels when almost everyone lives close to someone else. A young person may sleep in a room with siblings. Parents know who visits the house. Neighbours notice which road you walk down. Church gatherings, markets, dances, quilting parties, harvest events and visits create opportunities to meet. But they also create witnesses. You rarely disappear unnoticed. This makes courtship partly personal and partly communal. Families often take an interest in whether a match seems sensible. Marriage can affect property, labour, inheritance, household alliances, religion and social standing. Affection matters. So does practicality. You follow the young woman home the next evening. Her family house is warmer than the inn. The smell of bread and wood smoke hangs in the air. A brass candlestick sits on a table and several chairs have been moved into the front room. The young man arrives after dark. He knocks. Someone opens the door. His visit has a beginning, an end, and an audience. In many middle-class households, especially during the 19th century, formal calling customs become increasingly important. A visitor may be received in a parlour rather than wandering freely through private rooms. The parlour itself becomes a stage for respectable behaviour. You notice the furniture. Perhaps there is a sofa, several chairs, framed pictures, a small table and a decorative clock. The room may contain objects that are used far less often than those in the kitchen. This is where a household presents itself. The couple sits several feet apart. Conversation becomes the entertainment. You cannot simply turn on music from a machine or disappear into another room. You talk. You ask about relatives. You discuss books, weather, local events, church, travel, or mutual acquaintances. I become skilled at saying something meaningful while everyone else listens. Sometimes another person remains in the room deliberately. A sister sues. A mother reads. A younger brother pretends not to listen. Supervision varies greatly between families and periods, but the lack of complete privacy is a well-established feature of much courtship. I'll begin to notice another important object. A letter. When distance separates two people, correspondence can carry a relationship forward for months or years. You unfold a sheet carefully. Paper itself has value. Ink requires patience. A letter is composed slowly. Every word stays. There is no quick correction after it has been sent. You choose phrases with care because the reader may preserve them. Many surviving courtship letters reveal affection, uncertainty, humour, jealousy, practical concerns and negotiations about the future. They also remind you that old romance is not always as formal as the furniture suggests. People tease one another. They miss one another. They worry when replies arrive late. They reread favourite passages. You can imagine a folded letter tucked into a drawer and opened again after everyone has gone to sleep. Distance gives writing a special intimacy. A person who cannot speak freely in a crowded parlour may write more openly on paper. Still, letters have risks. They can be lost. They can be delayed. They can also be read by someone other than the intended recipient. Privacy remains fragile even in ink. You step forward several decades. Calling cards appear more clearly in the social rituals of the 19th century. A visitor may leave a small printed card bearing a name. The card can signal that someone called when the household was unavailable. In more formal circles, the way cards are delivered folded or returned may carry social meaning. The rules become surprisingly detailed. This is one of the stranger features of respectable social life. Any object no larger than your hand can quietly announce interest, courtesy, obligation, or acquaintance. Yet historians must be careful with etiquette manuals. They describe ideals. They do not prove that every family followed each rule exactly. People living in rural communities, working households, Immigrant neighborhoods, frontier settlements, and different cultural traditions often court in less formal ways. The manuals tell you what certain writers thought people should do. Real life remains untidier. You leave the parlor and follow music toward a gathering. A fiddle carries through the evening air. Inside a hall or large home, people are dancing. This is one of the rare places where courtship becomes more energetic. Shoes strike wooden boards. Skirts turn. Hands meet briefly. Everyone notices everyone else. A dance allows young people to spend time together while remaining inside a social group. You feel the floor vibrate beneath your feet. There may be reels, country dances, quadrilles, or other forms depending on time and place. A caller or musicians help keep the movement organized. For some communities, dancing is ordinary recreation. For others, religious beliefs make it suspicious or unacceptable. Old America never agrees entirely on how much fun is proper. That disagreement creates its own quiet historical humor. One family worries that dancing encourages foolishness. Another family considers a barn dance one of the best events of the year. You watch a young couple cross the room. They exchange only a few words, yet those few words may matter more than an hour of supervised conversation. Later you follow them outside onto a porch. The air is cool. Crickets sound from the darkness. This is one of the few places where they can speak with slightly more freedom. Still, someone inside can probably see the doorway. Courtship often depends on such edges. A gate. A porch, a garden path, a walk home from church, a shared task, places close enough to remain respectable but distant enough for a few private sentences. I begin to see how ordinary work itself can create opportunities. Young people meet during harvests. They help neighbors. They attend husking bees, quilting gatherings, church socials, picnics, and community celebrations. Romance grows between chores. One unusual courtship tradition, sometimes described in parts of colonial and early American culture as bundling. In certain communities, a courting couple might spend time together or in bed while remaining clothed, sometimes separated by a board or wrapped separately. The practice was intended to allow long conversation during cold evenings when houses had little heated space. Stories about bundling became famous and sometimes exaggerated. How widespread it truly was remains debated. Customs differed greatly between regions, denominations, and households. You should imagine it not as a universal American habit, but as one of those peculiar solutions created by architecture, climate supervision, and human ingenuity. Cold houses shaped romance too. Eventually, courtship reaches a question that cannot remain quiet forever. Marriage. For many people, marriage means establishing a working household. You need food, shelter, tools, furniture, income, or land. A marriage does not simply join two people. It creates an economic partnership. Work will be divided, though rarely equally by modern standards. Children may follow. Property laws will shape what married women can control depending on time and jurisdiction. Expectations are strong, and yet emotion continues beneath all of it. You stand near a doorway as a proposal is quietly accepted. There is no orchestra. No crowd gathers. The fire pops once. Someone smiles. Soon families will hear. Plans will begin. Clothing may need preparing. Household goods may be gathered. Letters will be written. A new home may be established, or the couple may join an existing household. The future remains uncertain. You leave them there. Outside, the road is pale beneath moonlight. Beyond, the town farmhouses sit among dark fields. Marriage will carry many couples into those fields, where romance quickly learns the rhythm of planting, milking, cooking, repairing, preserving, and harvesting. The porch grows distant behind you. Ahead, a barn door stands open beneath the early light of another working day, and from inside comes the smell of hay, animals, earth, and the endless seasonal labor of the family farm. Section 15. The barn door opens before sunrise. Cold air moves through the gap, carrying the smell of hay, leather, soil, and animals. Somewhere inside, a cow shifts her weight. A horse stamps against the wooden floor. Chickens begin making small, restless sounds beyond the wall. You have reached the family farm. Here, daily life is organized less by the clock than by the season. Spring brings planting. Summer brings growth. Autumn brings harvest. Winter brings repair, feeding, preserving, and waiting. The year turns slowly, but farm work rarely stops. You step into the barn. Dust floats through a narrow beam of morning light. Tools hang from pegs. A harness rests across a wooden rail. Near the doorway stand buckets, already waiting for the first chores. Animals come first. They cannot wait until breakfast. You follow someone toward the cows. Milking often begins early because dairy animals keep their own schedule. You sit on a low stool. The cow's side feels warm in the cool barn. Milk strikes the bottom of the pail with a steady metallic rhythm. At first, the sound is hollow. Then it becomes softer as the bucket fills. This simple task requires practice. A nervous animal can kick. A careless hand can spill what took time to collect. The milk itself will not remain fresh for long without cooling, so it must be used quickly or transformed. Some becomes butter, some becomes cheese, some is consumed by the household. Nothing waits comfortably in a refrigerator. You carry the pail toward the house. Already another family member is feeding chickens. Eggs are gathered. Pigs receive scrap. Horses are given hay or grain before they begin their own work. A farm animal is not simply part of the scenery. It's labor, food, transport, fertilizer, income and risk. A sick horse can delay ploughing. A poor harvest of hay can create winter trouble months later. A broken fence can ruin an afternoon. Every part of the farm seems connected to something else. You walk toward the fields. Spring has softened the earth. A plough waits near the fence. Before tractors, preparing land depends heavily on animals and human strength. Oxen may pull the plough in some places. Horses become increasingly important elsewhere. The farmer walks behind, guiding the blade through soil. You try it. The handles jump in your hands. Roots pull the plough sideways. Stones stop it suddenly. The animal team must be guided carefully. A straight furrow is not as easy as it looks. After only a short distance, your shoulders begin to ache. This is one well-established truth of old farm life. Agriculture requires relentless physical effort. Planting does not happen with the press of a button. Seeds are carried by hand. Rows are measured. Weeds must be removed. Fences must be repaired. Tools dull and break. Rain arrives too early, too late, or not at all. Weather is not background scenery. It is part of the household economy. You look toward the sky. Clouds can determine whether a year feels generous or anxious. A late frost may damage fruit blossoms. Heavy rain can flatten grain. Drought can reduce pasture. Storms can destroy fences and roofs. Families therefore talk about weather constantly because weather is always discussing their future. You continue into summer. The farm has changed. Fields are taller. Insects fill the warm air with sound. The kitchen and garden is thick with beans, herbs, squash, onions, cabbages, and whatever grows well in the local soil. Not every farm grows the same things. Regional differences are enormous. New England farms differ from southern farms. Midwestern farms differ again. Climate, soil markets, labor systems, and cultural traditions shape what people plant. Yet almost everywhere the household garden matters. It brings food close to the kitchen. You kneel beside a row of beans. The soil is dry and warm. Weeding seems like a minor task until you imagine doing it for hours. Children often help. So do women whose farm labor is sometimes hidden behind the simple description of housekeeping. That description can be misleading. Farm women may milk cows, tend gardens, preserve food, feed poultry, make butter, sew clothing, wash laundry, care for children, manage household accounts, and assist directly with harvest work. The boundary between house and farm is thin. You move toward the smokehouse. The little building stands apart from the kitchen. Its dark interior smells strongly of wood smoke and cured meat. Preservation connects the farm to winter. Meat may be salted and soaked. Fruit can be dried. Vegetables may be pickled or stored in cool spaces. Apples rest in cellars. Potatoes lie beneath earth or in storage bins. Grain is kept dry and protected from mice. You realize that much of farm life is actually preparation for a season that has not arrived yet. Summer makes winter possible. Autumn decides how comfortable February may be. The farm household always lives partly in the future. Then harvest comes. The pace changes. Fields that grew slowly for months must now be gathered at the correct moment. Grain is cut. Corn is picked. Apples are collected. Hay is stacked. Vegetables are brought in before frost. Everyone who can help often does. You hear wagons moving throughout the day. Barn doors stay open. Dust rises from threshing. Hands become rougher. Clothing collects burrs, straw, and mud. Meals may be eaten quickly because daylight is valuable. One unusual detail appears after some harvests. Neighbors gather to help one another. A barn raising corn, husking, threshing day, or other large job can become both labor and social event. Work is shared because certain tasks are too large for one household. Afterward, food, music, conversation, or simple visiting may follow. Community grows from necessity. You imagine several families standing beneath a half-finished barn frame. Heavy timbers rise together. No single person could easily lift them. Dozens of hands can. Such cooperation becomes one of the quieter strengths of rural life. Yet historians remain uncertain about how representative nostalgic descriptions of neighborly cooperation really are. Some communities were close. Others were divided by the religion, ethnicity, wealth, race, or personal conflict. Memory often preserves the barn raising more readily than the argument over a boundary fence. Real farm communities contained both generosity and tension. You keep both possibilities in view. Autumn deepens. The barn fills. Stacks of hay rise toward the rafters. Barrels line storage areas. The smell of apples mixes with dry straw. A feeling of completion settles over the household, but it never becomes complete rest. Tools must be repaired. Harnesses need oiling. Wood must be cut. Animals must be fed through winter. You enter the farmhouse after dark. Hands are washed in a basin. Boots are left near the door. Supper feels heavier after a long day outside. The room is warm from cooking. A pot of stew sits near the fire. Bread is passed around the towel. No one needs entertainment to make the evening feel peaceful. Exhaustion does that. You hear only spoons, firewood, and a few quiet voices. The year has been stored in the cellar, barn, smokehouse, and pantry. Winter can now arrive. And it will. Outside, the first sharp wind moves across the field. Leaves scrape along the ground. The sky has become clearer and colder. Soon frost will harden the road. Water buckets will freeze around the edge. Bedrooms will turn bitter before dawn. You stand beside the door and feel the temperature falling. The farm has spent months preparing for this moment. Now you're ready to discover what an old American winter truly demanded. Section 60. The cold arrives quietly at first. A thin white edge forms along the water bucket. Frost settles over the grass. Morning breath becomes visible in the barn, and the mud in the yard hardens beneath your shoes. Then winter truly takes hold. You wake before sunrise and discover that the room feels colder than the world outside seemed possible the night before. The air bites your face. Blankets hold warmth around your body, but the space beyond them has become something you hesitate to enter. The window glass is clouded with frost, and in places delicate white patterns spread across the inside. You remain beneath the covers for another moment. Eventually, someone must rise. The fire downstairs has weakened. That matters more now than ever. You pull on clothing quickly and descend toward the hearth. The floorboards feel cold through your stockings. Ash covers the remaining coals. Someone kneels and begins uncovering them carefully. A dull orange glow appears. Kindling follows. For several minutes, the entire household seems to depend upon a few stubborn embers. Then a flame catches. The sound is small. Its effect is enormous. Winter makes firewood feel almost like currency. You remember the pals prepared months earlier. Now they begin shrinking. Every cold day consumes another portion. A family that misjudged its winter supply may face difficult choices before spring returns. Wood must sometimes be cut even when snow is deep and hands are numb. You step outside toward the pile. Snow reaches over your shoes. The morning is strangely quiet. Fresh snow absorbs sound, leaving only the crunch beneath your feet and the distant movement of animals inside the barn. The sky is pale. Smoke rises almost straight from the chimney. You lift several logs. They feel heavier in the cold. Back inside, the heat near the fireplace is strong enough to warm your hands, but several feet away the room remains chilly. This uneven warmth is a defining feature of many older homes. One side of your body can feel hot while the other remains cold. You turn occasionally. People gather close to the fire because the fire warms people more effectively than it warms entire buildings. Beds, chairs, and work areas may be positioned according to heat rather than perfect convenience. Winter rearranges the household. You notice clothing changing as well. Layers matter. Wool becomes particularly valuable. You may wear linen close to the skin, then wool garments over it. Shawls, caps, stockings, mittens, coats, and heavier skirts or trousers add protection depending on age, gender, occupation, and period. Indoors, people do not necessarily remove every outer gear. A cold room remains a cold room. You see someone sewing near the hearth with a shawl wrapped tightly around the shoulders. Another person keeps a cap on. Warmth is practical, not fashionable. Outside daily work continues. Animals still need food and water. You cross toward the barn. The difference between the house and barn is surprisingly small at first. The barn is not heated, but animal bodies create some warmth indeed. Steam rises faintly from their breath. Hay smells sweeter in the cold air. Water troughs present a problem. Ice forms. Someone must break it. You strike the surface carefully and hear it crack. Animals need access to water even when everything around them is frozen. That simple fact creates repetitive winter labor. Buckets are carried. Ice is broken. Snow is shoveled. Feed is moved. Manure still has to be removed. Winter does not stop farm routines. It merely makes them harder. You walk toward the road. It has nearly disappeared beneath snow. Travel becomes uncertain. A road that was merely rough in autumn can become completely blocked after a storm. Wheels struggle in deep snow. In some regions, sleighs become useful once enough snow covers the ground. You hear bells before you see one approaching. Horse pulls a sleigh across the white road. The runners move more smoothly than wagon wheels would. The bells are not only cheerful decoration. They can also warn others that a vehicle is approaching, especially when snow muffles ordinary sounds. You watch it pass. The sound fades quickly. Winter travel can also be surprisingly efficient when conditions are right. Frozen ground may become easier to cross than autumn mud. Rivers and ponds sometimes create temporary routes once ice is considered safe enough, but safety is never guaranteed. Exactly how people judge ice thickness in everyday practice varies across communities and experience. There are rules of thumb. There is local knowledge. There is also risk. Historians can recover reports of accidents and dramatic freezes more easily than the countless ordinary crossings that left no record. Most winter travel disappears quietly from history. You return toward the house. Food has changed too. The garden is gone beneath snow. Fresh produce is limited. The household depends increasingly upon what was stored during autumn. Potatoes, turnips, carrots, cabbage, beans, dried fruit, apples that have survived storage, salted or smoked meat, flour and grain. Meals become heavier and more repetitive. You understand why preserving food was so important. A poorly stocked cellar makes winter feel much longer. You descend into one. The air is cold but steadier than outside. Root vegetables sit in bins. Apples are examined for rot because one spoiled piece can damage those around it. Nothing is forgotten casually. Food stores must be watched. Mice remain interested too. So do insects. The cold slows some problems but does not remove them. You carry several potatoes upstairs. The kitchen is warmer now. A pot simmers. Steam clouds a nearby window. For a few minutes, the room feels almost comfortable. Then the door opens. A rush of cold air sweeps across the floor. Everyone notices. Doors are closed quickly in winter. Curtain shutters, rugs, and even fabric hung near openings can help reduce drafts. Some families stuff cracks. Others use whatever materials they have to slow the movement of air. A house breathes through every imperfect joint. You can feel it. One unusual winter habit involves warming more than beds. Bricks or stones can be heated near the hearth, wrapped and placed at the feet during travel, or beneath blankets. A traveller in a carriage may carry a foot warmer containing heated material. Churchgoers sometimes bring small foot stoves or warming devices into unheated meeting houses. Imagine sitting through a long winter service while your breath hangs in the air. A little box of warmth near your shoes becomes surprisingly precious. Still, warmth can create dangers. Closed rooms and fires increase the risk of smoke. Chimneys need maintenance. Barks remain dangerous. Families may close spaces tightly against cold while depending upon open flames for heat and light. Winter comfort always carries negotiation. You move deeper into the season. Days remain short. Darkness arrives early. This changes work. Outdoor labour must fit inside limited daylight, while indoor tasks occupy longer evenings. Clothing is repaired. Tools are sharpened. Wooden objects are made. Corn may be shelled. Wool can be spun. Stories are told. Letters are written. Winter forces families together. Sometimes this creates closeness. Sometimes it creates irritation. The historical record rarely preserves the ordinary tensions of 5 or 8 people spending long evenings in one small heated room. You can imagine them easily enough. Someone sits too close to the fire. Someone talks too much. A child grows restless. A draft enters beneath the door. Then someone tells a story and the room becomes quiet again. Outside wind pushes snow against the wall. You listen. The sound is soft but persistent. Storms can isolate households for days. Neighbours matter greatly during such times. People may help clear paths, share food, lend animals, or check on families living alone. But how reliable such assistance was depends on distance, community relationships, weather, and circumstance. Old memories often make winter cooperation sound universal. Reality was probably more uneven. Some people received help. Others endured alone. You look through the frosted window. The world beyond it seems almost empty, Yet under the snow spring is waiting. That thought matters. Winter is endured partly because it ends. Weeks pass. The daylight slowly lengthens. It's begin dripping at midday. The road becomes visible again in patches. Then another problem appears. Mud. Snow melts into lanes, yards, and fields. Winter does not disappear gracefully. It becomes water. Still before that messy transition arrives, you stand one final time beside the hearth on a deep winter evening. The room smells of wool, smoke, stew, and drying boots. A candle burns on the table. Wind moves beyond the shutters. You understand now that surviving winter was not one dramatic act. It was thousands of small ones, carrying wood, breaking ice, mending clothing, saving food, closing shutters, feeding animals, warming beds, waiting for light. And just as cold shaped every winter habit, another season would force families to solve the opposite problem. Soon the frost would vanish. Windows would open. Insects would return. Bedrooms would trap heat instead of cold. You listen to water dripping from the roof as the season begins to loosen its grip. Old America is preparing for summer. Section 17. The dripping roof of late winter eventually falls silent. Snow retreats into shaded corners. Mud begins to dry, grass returns along fences, and the first warm evenings invite windows to remain open a little longer. For a while the change feels gentle, then summer settles over the house. By midday the rooms that once struggled to hold warmth begin trapping it. You stand beside an open window and wait for a breeze. None comes. Sunlight lies heavily across the yard. Insects hum beyond the screenless opening, and somewhere beneath the trees a dog has found the coolest patch of earth available. Old America has no air conditioner waiting to rescue you. Keeping cool requires another collection of small adjustments. The first is simple. You avoid unnecessary heat. During the cold months, the hearth was the center of the household. Now the same fireplace can make a kitchen almost unbearable. Cooking becomes carefully timed. Whenever possible, heavy baking may be done earlier in the morning before the hottest hours arrive. Some households make greater use of separate kitchens, summer kitchens, outdoor cooking spaces, or detached work areas. These arrangements are especially useful because heat smoke and cooking odors remain away from the main living rooms. You step into one such summer kitchen. Its doors stand open. A kettle simmers while air moves through the building more freely than it does inside the house. The arrangement also reduces another danger: fire. Keeping a busy cooking hearth away from the main dwelling can limit the damage if sparks escape or grease ignites. Not every household has a separate kitchen, however. Architecture depends on region, wealth period, and local custom. You return to the main house. Mouse. Shutters have been adjusted to block direct sunlight. Curtains soften the glare. Windows on opposite sides remain open in hopes of creating a cross-breeze. This is one well-established principle of older architecture. Before mechanical cooling houses are often designed to cooperate with moving air. High ceilings allow warmer air to rise. Porches shade walls and windows. Transoms above doors can help air pass between rooms. In warmer regions, large central hallways may channel breezes through the house. I begin to see architecture as a form of climate control. It cannot make August cold, but it can make August bearable. You move onto the porch. Immediately the air feels easier. The roof blocks the sun. A rocking chair waits near the wall. Someone has placed a pitcher of water on a small table. Porches become valuable living spaces during hot weather. People sew there. They shell beans there. They read newspapers, mend tools, watch children, talk with neighbors, and sometimes remain outside long after darkness arrives. The house temporarily expands into the yard. You sit. Cicadas pulse from the trees. A horse flicks its tail against flies. The air smells of warm soil-cut grass, dust, and distant cooking smoke. Wet forms beneath your clothing. There is no expectation that summer should feel perfectly comfortable. People simply adapt their routines. Clothing helps, although fashion does not always cooperate. Lightweight linen and cotton are useful in warm weather, but social expectations can still require layers that seem excessive to you. Men may wear shirts, waistcoats, trousers, and jackets according to occasion and period. Women's clothing can involve several garments, though materials construction and changing fashions affect how oppressive the layers actually feel. Historical clothing is often misunderstood when judged only by appearance. Loose, natural fabrics can breathe more effectively than some modern synthetic materials. Still, a crowded formal room in July is unlikely to be pleasant. You understand why handheld fans become familiar accessories. A folding fan creates only a little moving air. On a still afternoon, that little movement feels important. You watch someone open one with practiced ease. Children prefer another solution. Water. You follow them down a path toward a stream. The trees provide shade and the ground becomes cooler as you descend. 4 modern swimming pools spread widely rivers. Ponds, swimming holes, beaches and lakes provide places to cool down. Children wade barefoot. Older boys may swim. Adults sometimes bathe or swim as well, though. Customs about modesty, gender and appropriate bathing vary considerably. The water feels shockingly cool against your feet. For a moment, summer disappears. You sit on a smooth stone near the bank. Dragonflies move above the surface. Someone laughs downstream. Swimming is not always treated purely as recreation. People also wash fish, water animals, and perform work in the same waterways. That creates concerns about cleanliness and safety. Strong currents, deep holes, and contaminated water are real risks. Exactly how frequently ordinary rural families use local swimming places is difficult to measure. Diaries and memoirs mention them, but countless informal summer swims left no record. Like so much ordinary pleasure, they vanished with the afternoon. You return toward town beneath a hotter sun. A wagon stands beside the road. You recognize the ice. Earlier, you watched an iceman carry blocks into houses. Now, during summer, you understand why his arrival can feel almost magical. Natural ice harvested during winter has spent months inside an ice house. You step into one. The temperature changes immediately. Thick walls and insulation slow the melting. Sawdust may sew around stacked blocks. The air smells of damp wood and cold earth. Outside, the day is sweltering. inside winter has been stored. This is one of the more remarkable technologies of everyday 19th century life. Ice houses allow households, businesses, hotels, and food sellers to preserve cold long after ponds have thawed. By the later 19th century, household ice boxes become increasingly familiar in many communities. An icebox is not a refrigerator in the modern sense. It is an insulated cabinet. A block of ice cools the interior as it melts. Someone must replace the ice regularly. Someone must empty the drip pan. You open the door. Milk, butter, meat, or other perishable foods may last longer inside than they would on an ordinary shelf. The change is significant. Cold becomes something that can be purchased, yet access remains uneven. Poor households may use less ice or none at all. Rural families, far from delivery routes, depend more heavily on cellars, springhouses, wells, evaporation preservation, and daily cooking. Once again, old America contains many different summers. You continue into the evening. The temperature finally begins to fall. Windows remain open. That solves one problem and creates another. Insects enter. Mosquitoes whine near your ear. Flies circle the kitchen. Moths gather around lamps. Before window screens become widespread, open windows offer ventilation at the price of unwanted visitors. Screens become increasingly common during the 19th century as inexpensive wire mesh becomes more available. Their effect on the daily comfort is greater than their simplicity suggests. You stand beside a screened window. Air enters. Mosquitoes mostly do not. A thin piece of wire has changed summer. Before screens, families use bed curtains, mosquito netting, smoke fans, swatting, and various substances intended to discourage insects. Some remedies help. Others smell worse than the insects. Mosquitoes are more than an annoyance. Diseases such as malaria and yellow fever profoundly affect parts of American life, although the role of mosquitoes is not scientifically established until the end of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th. For generations, people blame unhealthy air, swamps, weather, and other environmental conditions. The danger flies around them unseen in its true form. Night comes slowly. The bedroom upstairs still holds the day's heat. You open every possible window. Sheets replace heavy winter blankets. A person may sleep in lighter clothing, move closer to an open window, or even choose a porch when circumstances allow. Stories of sleeping on porches, rooftops, fire escapes, or other outdoor spaces become especially familiar in hot urban environments during later periods. Whether such practices were common in every neighborhood is uncertain. They depended on safety, housing, custom, and available space. But the reason is obvious. Sometimes outdoors is cooler than indoors. You lie beneath a thin sheet. The house is almost dark. From outside comes a completely different soundscape from winter. Crickets pulse in the grass. Frogs call near water. Leaves move faintly. A distant voice crosses the yard. Somewhere a screen door closes with a wooden slap. You wait for the next breeze. When it finally enters, it passes over your skin like a small gift. That is how summer comfort works here. Shade matters. Water matters. Ice matters. Timing matters. A porch matters. A breeze matters. No single invention makes the season comfortable. Instead, people arrange their entire day around the heat. They rise earlier. They rest during hotter hours when work allows. They cook carefully. They open houses at night and close them against direct sunlight by day. They carry fans. They seek trees. They wait. And eventually every hot day becomes evening. You listen as conversation begins on the porch below. Someone has brought out a newspaper. Another person is sewing beside a lamp. A child asks for a story. There is no glowing screen waiting to fill the darkness. Only lamplight, familiar voices, music, letters, games, and the slow hours between supper and sleep. You rise and follow the sound downstairs. The summer evening is ready to show you how people passed the night before modern entertainment entered every room. Section 19. The summer evening settles slowly around the house. You come downstairs while the last pale light is still resting against the windows. Supper has been cleared. The room smells faintly of bread lamp oil, warm wood, and the dust that entered through open screens during the day. Outside insects continue their steady chorus. Inside, the householder prepares for several hours of darkness. There is no television waiting in the corner. No radio has begun speaking from a shelf. No electric light fills every room with the brightness of midday. Instead, evening is shaped by small circles of light. Someone trims the wick of a lamp. Another person places a candle on the table. The hearth may still glow, though in summer, its fire is smaller than during winter. You sit nearby. Beyond the lamp, the corners of the room become shadow. This limited light affects everything people do. Reading takes concentration. Fine sewing can tire the eyes. Finding a dropped needle becomes an adventure no one particularly enjoys. People therefore gather close together. Light is too valuable to scatter across several rooms. One lamp may serve an entire family. You notice how naturally this creates companionship. Even when everyone is occupied with a different task, they remain within the same small illuminated space. A woman repairs a shirt, a man examines a newspaper, a child practices letters, someone else works on a wooden handle that needs smoothing. No one announces that the family is spending time together. They simply are. You listen to the quiet mixture of sounds. Thread pulls through cloth, paper turns, a knife scrapes gently across wood, a chair creaks. The clock, if the household owns one, ticks steadily against the wall. Evening work is often lighter than daytime labour, but it is still work. Clothing must be mended because tomorrow will wear it again. Stockings develop holes. Buttons come loose. Seams weaken. You watch a needle pass through fabric with practice speed. The repair is almost invisible when finished. That small skill saves money. It also extends the life of clothing that may already have served for years. Elsewhere in the room, wool might be spun, corn shelled, beans and sorted, tools sharpened, or household accounts recorded. The exact task changes with season and occupation, but evenings are rarely empty. I begin to understand how differently people once experienced leisure. Rest and usefulness overlap. Someone can listen to a story while knitting. Someone can discuss neighborhood news while repairing harness leather. The hands continue moving while conversation fills the room. Eventually, the newspaper becomes the center of attention. The reader clears his throat. Others keep working. He begins reading aloud. This is a well-established feature of older household and community life. Printed material can become shared entertainment rather than a private experience. One person reads. Several listen. News, serialized fiction, speeches, advertisements, poems, strange reports from distant places and local announcements all enter the room through one voice. You hear the name of a city hundreds of miles away. For a few minutes, the household travels there without leaving the table. A story about a storm follows. Then an advertisement for a tonic promises impressive results. Someone laughs softly. The newspaper is serious and entertaining at once. You remember how expensive printed material could once be. A paper is often reused. It passes from household to household. Old copies wrap objects, line shelves, help start fires, and eventually find purposes that have little to do with reading. Nothing remains only one thing for long. The children grow restless. A game begins. Perhaps it requires cards. Perhaps someone brings out checkers. Maybe the game needs nothing at all except memory and imagination. Riddles are especially useful. So are guessing games. You listen as someone describes an object without naming it. The others try to identify it. There is laughter when a child gives an answer that makes perfect sense but happens to be wrong. Games like these leave very little historical evidence. You can find published collections of parlor games and descriptions in memoirs, but historians cannot know exactly what every ordinary family played on an ordinary evening. That uncertainty is part of their charm. Most laughter was never recorded. You turn toward a shelf. A musical instrument rests there. It might be a fiddle. In another household, perhaps a flute, banjo, guitar, harmonica, or small keyboard instrument appears depending on period, culture, and prosperity. Music requires no electricity. It requires a person. Someone takes up the fiddle. The first note is slightly rough. The second is better. Soon a familiar tune fills the room. Feet begin tapping. A child quietly hums. The same melody may have been learned from a parent neighbor, traveler, church gathering dance, or another musician whose name is already forgotten. Music passes easily without written notation. People remember by listening. That makes everyday music difficult for historians to reconstruct precisely. Published songs survive. Commercial sheet music survives, but local variations change as melodies move from person to person. You are hearing one version among hundreds. When the fiddle stops, conversation returns. Stories follow. Family stories are especially important. An older person remembers a winter many years earlier. Someone tells about an uncle who became lost on a road. Another story concerns a horse that apparently possessed more intelligence than its owner. The details may improve each time the tale is repeated. No one worries very much. Family storytelling is not an archive. It is memory shaped into company. You realize that people living without recorded entertainment often become skilled entertainers themselves. They sing. They tell stories. They recite poems. They imitate neighbors. They remember jokes. They invent games. The household creates what it needs. You step outside onto the porch. Neighbors are walking up the path. An evening visit may happen without elaborate planning. People sit together after work. Someone brings food. Someone carries a piece of news. The visit gives everyone a reason to remain awake slightly longer. Porches become social rooms during warm weather. You sit beneath the darkening sky. The air smells of cut grass and distant smoke. Conversation moves gently from crops to births, weather, marriages, prices, illness, and local personalities. No topic stays very long. Fireflies appear near the fence. A child tries to catch one. This is ordinary pleasure. Nothing has been purchased. Nothing has been scheduled. The evening simply unfolds. One unusual feature of 19th century social life is the popularity of organized parlor amusements. Depending on the household and decade, guests might participate in charades, forfeits, word games, tableaux, or other entertainments that require people to perform rather than merely watch. You imagine being asked to pose silently while others guess the scene. The room fills with suppressed laughter. For a modern visitor, some games may seem surprisingly elaborate, yet when entertainment must be created locally, imagination becomes part of the equipment. The night grows darker. The neighbors eventually leave. Their footsteps fade down the path. Inside, someone begins writing a letter. You watch the pen move slowly across paper. Evening is often the best time for correspondence because daytime labor is finished. A letter may travel for days or weeks. The writer therefore includes several subjects at once: weather, health, family news, harvests, money, a wedding, a death, a request to write back soon. The final line is added. The paper is folded. Perhaps an envelope is used depending on the period. Before envelopes become inexpensive and common letters can be folded into their own covers and sealed. A small object now contains an entire evening's thoughts. Tomorrow it may begin a journey farther than its writer travels all year. You look around the room once more. The lamp has burned lower. Everyone is becoming quieter. Evening entertainment ends partly because artificial light costs something. Oil is consumed. Candles disappear inch by inch. Staying awake has a material price. Daylight will return for free. That encourages people to follow the sun more closely than you usually do. One lamp is extinguished, then another. The house contracts into darkness. You climb the stairs. Through the open window comes the sound of crickets and a distant wagon. The evening seemed simple, but it contained work news, music, storytelling, games, neighbors, and letters. People did not live without entertainment. They made more of it themselves. As you lie down, the last thought follows you towards sleep. Soon even these evenings will change. Electric lights will brighten rooms. Telephones will ring, bicycles will pass outside, mail-order catalogues will grow thicker, streetcars will move through expanding towns. The old rhythms will not disappear at once, but around the year 1900 they will begin sharing space with a new America. And when you wake again, you will find yourself walking down a main street where the future has already started arriving. Section 19. Morning returns with a different sound. You hear a bell, not the small bell above the general store door and not the distant call of a schoolhouse. This one comes from the street. A streetcar passes slowly through town. Metal wheels grind against rails. A horse-drawn wagon moves aside. Someone rings a bicycle bell near the curb while several pedestrians pause beneath shop signs painted across brick buildings. You have arrived near the beginning of the 20th century. Old America is still here, but something has changed. The wooden houses remain. Farm wagons still enter town. Women carry baskets. Children hurry towards school. A blacksmith continues working somewhere nearby. Yet beside these familiar sights, a new world is beginning to appear. You step onto Main Street. Electric wires stretch overhead. They look almost fragile against the morning sky. For many Americans around 1900, electricity is still unevenly distributed. Large cities gain electric lighting earlier, while rural households may wait decades longer. The transformation happens slowly. That is important. Modern life does not arrive everywhere at once. You may leave a brightly illuminated city street and travel only a short distance into a countryside still depending on kerosene lamps and candles. 2 centuries seem to exist side by side. You enter a shop. A glass bulb hangs overhead. When the light is switched on, there is no flame. No smoke appears. No wick needs trimming. The brightness feels steady. This simple change alters evening life dramatically. Shops can remain open later. Factories can extend working hours. Homes with electricity can read, sew, and work without consuming candles or lamp oil. Yet the first electric lights do not automatically feel comfortable to everyone. Some people find them harsh. Others are fascinated. You look upward. For generations, light has always meant flame. Now it comes through a wire. That is a profound change hidden inside a small glass bulb. You return to the street. A boy rides past on a bicycle. By the 1890s, the bicycle has become one of the great everyday technologies of American life. It is relatively fast. It does not need feeding. It does not leave a manure in the street. And it gives ordinary people a new kind of personal mobility. You watch a young woman riding farther ahead. The bicycle becomes especially significant for women, providing greater independence and influencing clothing styles as riders seek garments practical enough for movement. This is one well-established part of the bicycle craze. It also creates moral concern among some observers. New freedoms often do. People argue over whether women should ride, how they should dress, and where they should go. You can almost hear the old world negotiating with the new one. The bicycle keeps moving. It does not stop for the argument. Farther down the street stands a telephone exchange. You enter quietly. Several women sit before a large switchboard. Wires run from holes arranged in rows. A small light or signal appears. One operator responds. She connects a caller by physically placing cords into the correct sockets. The telephone feels almost magical when you consider what it replaces. A message that once required a letter, messenger, or journey can now move through a wire almost instantly. You lift a receiver. The voice at the other end sounds faint and slightly strange. But it is there. Distance has changed again. Early telephone service is not private in the way you expect. In rural areas, party lines may connect several households to the same circuit. Each home can have a distinctive ring pattern. People are supposed to answer only their own calls. Human curiosity does not always cooperate. Neighbors can quietly lift receivers and listen. This becomes one of the unusual social details of early telephone life. A new technology arrives. So does a new way to gossip. Exactly how often people listen secretly is impossible to measure. Stories and complaints survive, but nobody kept reliable statistics on neighborly curiosity. You leave the exchange smiling slightly. Across the street, another form of communication is waiting. Mail. The postal system has become faster, broader, and more dependable. In 1896, rural free delivery begins expanding service into parts of the countryside, eventually bringing mail directly to millions of rural Americans. Before this, many farm families had to travel to town or a post office to collect letters. Now the road itself becomes a communication line. You imagine a farmer standing beside a mailbox. Inside may be a family letter, a newspaper, a bill, a seed catalogue, or one of the thick mail-order catalogues that increasingly change rural shopping. You turn the pages of one. The variety is astonishing. Clothing, tools, furniture, watches, stoves, musical instruments, household goods, farm equipment, toys. Almost anything seems possible. In some periods, companies even sell prefabricated house components through catalogues, allowing customers to order much of a home by mail and rail. Imagine purchasing walls, windows, doors, and lumber from printed pages. The idea sounds modern. It belongs to old America. The catalogue becomes more than a shopping tool. It becomes a window. A child in a remote farmhouse can study products from distant cities. Family can compare prices without traveling. People begin wanting objects they have never seen in person. Consumer culture enters the kitchen by post. You continue walking. A department store rises near the center of a larger town. Its windows are carefully arranged. Goods are displayed not only to be purchased, but to be desired. You see ready-made clothing. This marks another enormous shift. Earlier generations depended heavily on household sewing, local tailors, dressmakers, and handmade garments. Factory production gradually expands access to standardized clothing. Sizes are imperfect. Fit is not always ideal. Still, buying a finished garment saves time. The household economy changes one shirt at a time. You enter. The building smells of fabric, polished wood, soap, perfume, paper, and dust. An elevator may be waiting nearby. By the larger establishment. If you have never ridden one, the experience feels uncertain. A uniformed attendant closes a gate. The floor rises. Your stomach notices before your mind accepts it. Vertical travel has entered ordinary commerce. Outside again, another machine begins making noise. An automobile passes. People turn to look. At this moment, the horse still dominates most streets. Automobiles are expensive and uncommon. They are noisy. They break down. Roads were not built with them in mind, but they represent something powerful. A machine can now move without rails and without an animal pulling it. You smell fuel and exhaust where horse sweat and manure once dominated. The old street is beginning to acquire a new scent. That transition is not clean. For years, automobiles, bicycles, streetcars, wagons, horses, and pedestrians share the same roads. Rules are still developing. Traffic can feel chaotic. People debate speed. Animals become frightened. Drivers learn by experience. The street itself must adapt. You walk toward a corner where a public drinking fountain stands. Nearby, someone is sweeping refuse from the street. Cities are changing their ideas about sanitation. Sewer systems expand. Piped water becomes more common. Public health campaigns gradually alter habits concerning waste, food, and cleanliness. Indoor bathrooms appear in increasing numbers of homes, especially among wealthier urban families. But once again, change is uneven. One house may have a flush toilet. The neighboring family may still use a privy. One apartment has running water. Another relies on a shared hallway tap. The year 1900 is not a clean border between old and new. It is a mixture. You see this everywhere. A woman carries a basket past a telephone pole. It's beside an electric car. A boy reading a mail order catalogue walks home to a house lit by kerosene. A factory worker buys machine-made clothing and returns to a kitchen where meals are still cooked on a coal or wood stove. The future arrives in pieces. That may be the most important truth of this main street. People rarely wake and discover that history has changed overnight. Instead, one object appears, then another. A wire, a lamp, a bicycle, a telephone, a catalogue, a streetcar, a motorcar. Each invention adjusts one small routine. Together they begin changing everything. The sun lowers behind the buildings. Electric lamps blink on along the street. For the first time in your long journey, darkness does not fully reclaim the town. Shop windows continue glowing. The streetcar moves again. A telephone rings behind a wall. Somewhere nearby, an old man still trims a kerosene lamp. You stand between those two lights. One belongs to the world you have been walking through. The other points toward the century ahead. Soon many of the routines you have followed will fade. The outdoor privy, the hand pump, the iceman, the lamplighter, the shared bed at an inn, the weekly wash boiler, the general store ledger, the slow road measured by horses. They will not vanish everywhere come at once. Some will linger for decades. Others will survive only in memory. You turn away from Main Street and begin walking back toward the older houses behind town. The journey is almost complete. Now you can look back at everything you have seen and notice something quiet. Old America was not made from dramatic moments. It was made from mornings, meals, buckets, beds, roads, work, weather, and millions of small habits that once felt permanent. Ahead, one last doorway stands open. You step toward it slowly, ready to watch that familiar world fade into history. Section 20. You step through the final doorway slowly. Behind you, Main Street still glows with electric lamps, but ahead the older house remains lit by flame. The contrast is gentle rather than dramatic. A kerosene lamp rests on a table. A kettle warms near the stove. Boots stand beside the door. A wood and bucket waits in the corner, though a metal pump has already appeared outside. Nothing has vanished completely. Not yet. That is how old America begins to fade. One habit at a time. You have travelled through mornings that began before sunrise, houses shaped around fireplaces, breakfasts built from stored food, laundry carried through buckets, and bedrooms where warmth had to be created rather than expected. Now many of those routines are beginning to change. You walk into the kitchen. The room looks familiar. There is still a table scarred by years of use. There are jars on shelves and flour in a container near the wall. But beside them stands a newer stove. For generations, cooking depended upon open hearths and careful arrangements of coals. Later, cast iron stoves made heat easier to control. Then gas and electric ranges began appearing. The transformation seems simple. You turn a control rather than building a fire. But that small action removes entire chains of labor. Less wood must be chopped. Fewer ashes must be carried out. Heat becomes easier to regulate. Cooking gradually becomes less dependent on tending flame hour after hour. You look toward the sink. Running water may now reach some homes. A faucet changes the meaning of almost every domestic task. You no longer have to lower a bucket into a well for each drink. Water arrives inside. Soon hot water systems will make bathing easier too. A room dedicated to washing and sanitation begins becoming more common. The scattered functions you followed earlier start gathering together. The wash basin, the chamber pot, the outdoor privy, the portable bathtub. They slowly become one bathroom. This is a well-established change in American domestic life. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, although access remains highly uneven, cities often gain services sooner. Wealthier families adopt improvements earlier. Many rural homes continue using wells, pumps, outhouses, and wood stoves long after modern systems become familiar elsewhere. History does not move at one speed. You can stand in one American town and find households living decades apart technologically. That uncertainty matters when you imagine ordinary life. There is no single morning when everyone stops using a privy. No single winter when every fireplace becomes unnecessary. No single summer when every house receives electricity. The old world lingers. You leave the kitchen and climb the stairs. The bedroom has changed more slowly. A bed still waits beneath blankets. A chair remains near the wall. Yet mattresses are becoming more standardized. Metal springs become increasingly common. Factory-made furniture enters more households. Ready-made bedding appears through stores and catalogs. The room may eventually gain an electric bulb. That one bulb changes nighttime. You no longer measure evening in inches of candle. You can remain awake without worrying about lamp oil. Children read longer. Adults sue later. A forgotten corner of the room becomes visible after dark for the first time. Light changes not only what you see, it changes when you do things. You walk downstairs again. A telephone rings. Someone answers almost immediately. Only a few decades earlier, news from distant relatives might have required days or weeks. Now a voice crosses miles in seconds. Later, radio will carry music, news, sermons, comedy and advertisements directly into the home. Evening entertainment begins shifting away from performance by the family itself. You no longer need someone in the room to play every tune. You no longer need a traveller to bring every distant story. The outside world begins entering the house continuously. Something is gained. Something quietly changes. You step onto the porch. The rocking chair is still there. Neighbours still stop to talk. Children still chase one another along the road. But a motorcar passes. Its engine interrupts the insects for several seconds. Then it is gone. The road itself will soon change. Mud and ruts become less acceptable as automobiles spread. Road surfaces improve. Distances shrink again. A trip that once required an inn becomes an afternoon drive. Railroads already compress geography. Cars will compress it further. Small roadside businesses appear. Some old inns disappear. Livery stables lose customers. Blacksmiths adapt or close. The sounds of town change. Horse hooves become less common. Engines take their place. You remember the workers you met earlier. The lamplighter is among the first to fade. Electric street lights no longer need someone carrying flame from post to post each evening. The iceman lasts longer. Iceboxes remain important until mechanical refrigerators spread through households. Milk delivery continues. So does laundry service. Some occupations disappear quickly. Others survive in altered forms. A blacksmith may become an automobile mechanic. A carriage maker may begin repairing motor bodies. A general store may grow into a larger retail business. People do not simply vanish when technology changes. They adjust when they can. That may be one of the least visible parts of progress. Every convenient invention changes someone's working day. You return toward the old general store. Its shelves are still crowded, but mail-order catalogues have expanded the world beyond them. Later, chain stores and supermarkets will reshape shopping again. Standardized packaging replaces many barrels. Manufactured goods become cheaper. Households purchase things they once made or repaired at home. Soap arrives already wrapped. Clothing arrives finished. Bread can be bought rather than baked. Furniture can arrive by rail. Even food becomes increasingly detached from local seasons. The cellar still matters. But eventually refrigeration will make August less different from February. That may be one of the deepest changes of all. For most of the journey, season ruled ordinary life. Winter meant stored roots and smoked meat. Summer meant heat flies, open windows and fresh garden food. Autumn meant preserving. Spring meant scarcity ending. Modern systems slowly weaken those boundaries. I begin expecting strawberries when the local fields are empty. You expect milk to remain cold. You expect fresh meat without seeing a smokehouse. The old calendar softens. You walk beyond town toward the farm. The barn still stands. Inside tools hang where you saw them earlier. But machines begin appearing. Mechanical reapers, threshing machines, improved plows, and eventually tractors reduce some forms of labor while increasing productivity. Farm life remains demanding. It simply demands different skills. Children spend more time in school. Compulsory education laws expand Fewer young people spend entire days performing household labor. Childhood itself begins changing. That transition is uneven too. Farm children still help. Working-class children still contribute wages in many families. Yet the idea that children should spend more years learning and fewer years working becomes stronger. You think again of the child carrying the oversized bucket. The bucket has become lighter only because another system now carries the water. So much of modernization can be understood that way. Work does not always disappear. It moves into pipes, wires, machines, factories, utilities, and public systems. You turn back toward town. There is one unusual detail hidden inside this transition. People often save older objects long after newer technologies appear. An electric home may keep oil lamps in case the power fails. A family with running water may keep the old pump. A barn may contain horse equipment years after the automobile arrives. Old tools survive in attics because they still seem useful. This overlap makes the historical landscape wonderfully untidy. The future does not sweep the past away. It stores it in sheds. Historians sometimes struggle to determine exactly when a particular household stopped following an older custom because objects can survive long after regular use ends. A photograph may show a pump beside a house without revealing whether anyone still depends on it. An old stove might remain after a newer one arrives. Memory complicates the picture further. People often remember the habits of childhood more vividly than the gradual moment when those habits ended. You understand why. There is rarely a ceremony. No one gathers the family to announce the final bucket drawn from a well. No one knows which night will be the last night beneath a certain quilt. The last horse-drawn trip to town may feel completely ordinary. The final letter delivered before a telephone call replaces it may be opened without notice. Endings hide inside routine. You pause near the house where your journey began. The same doorway stands before you. Morning light now touches the wood. You remember the first ember uncovered beneath ash, the first bucket lifted from the well, the rough table, the preserved food, the bed curtains, the schoolhouse slate, the general store ledger, the road dust, the boarding house stairs, the porch conversation, the summer insects, the winter woodpile. None of these things belong to famous people. That is why they matter here. Most history was lived by people whose names never entered textbooks. They woke. They ate. They worked. They worried about weather. They repaired what broke. They raised children. They visited neighbors. They fell asleep. Then another morning came. Old America was built from that repetition. Its disappearance happened the same way. Quietly. A wire replaced a lamp. A pipe replaced a bucket. A motor replaced a horse. A refrigerator replaced an ice box. A paved road replaced mud. And one ordinary day, what had always been normal became old-fashioned. You stand for a final moment beside the doorway. Nothing around you asks to be remembered. That is perhaps why remembering it feels so peaceful. Word count 1 knuckle. The house is quiet now. You no longer need to hurry toward the well or keep the fire alive. The buckets can remain beside the wall. The road can rest beneath moonlight. The general store has closed for the evening, and the little bell above its door will not ring again tonight. You walk slowly back through the places you visited. The schoolhouse stands empty beneath the trees. A slate remains on one desk, its final arithmetic problem already wiped away. Farther along, the blacksmith's forge has gone dark. The hammer is still. The lamplighter has finished his route. In a distant barn, horses shift gently against the straw. You pass a farmhouse where one small window glows amber. Inside, someone has folded a letter. Someone else has finished mending a sleeve. A child has fallen asleep beneath a quilt. The ordinary day has ended. Above the roof, smoke rises into the cool night air and disappears among the stars. You continue toward the old road. There are no engines now, only wind moving through grass and the faint sound of water somewhere beyond the trees. All those forgotten routines seem to settle around you without asking for attention. The warm bowl at breakfast, the cold wash basin, the worn shoes, the creaking bed, the porch after sunset, the first snow, the last candle. For the people who knew them, these were not historical details. They were simply life. And perhaps that is the quiet gift hidden inside ordinary history. You discover that the past was never made only from great events. It was made from millions of small mornings and evenings, each one disappearing almost as soon as it happened. Now the old house grows dim behind you. The final lamp is lowered. The porch becomes shadow. The road fades into darkness. And somewhere beyond the forgotten door, another ordinary morning waits patiently in the past.